Hey folks, NBZ here. Just wanted to do a quick reminder at the top of the show that we still have our survey going on. So if you have the time, 5 minutes or so, to go and give it a look and just write out your thoughts on the podcast, that would be fantastic. It is linked in the description, so just go on over and check it out. All right, on with the show. Hello everyone and welcome to This Nintendo Life episode 168. My name is NBZ and I don't think I've been outside for a day, which is quite good actually. You know, I went for a walk yesterday. Here's the irony, Bally, with this entire situation, is I go outside more than I usually do. Ironically, which is just, I'm a hobbit, right? I live in my hobbit hole and I never clean myself and I'm just like a little gremlin rat. So ironically, I'm going out more than usual. It's a good time. I really enjoy going for a walk and listening to books. I'm going through the Wheel of Time series and just like listening.
Oh,
at
you're audiobooking
1.6.
that? I thought you.
Yeah, a little bit sometimes. So I've got it on Kindle and on audiobook. So I listen at like 1.6 times speed as I walk, and I get through a couple of chapters.
Does that
Feels
link
good.
up through an Amazon account?
No.
Okay.
It doesn't. Well, I mean, you can do that, but I don't have it set up that way. But I think you can do that. I usually just stop at the end of a chapter, and then I can just find it on my Kindle and go through the chapter if I want to. Cool. It's easy enough. But yeah, that's what I've been doing.
Wheel of Time going well?
It's going well. I am almost
10 or something.
I'm on book 10, you're right. Well done, Bally. Wow, keeping track.
Follow you on Twitter. Is that the final one?
No, there's 14 books.
Okay.
So I'm at the end of the slog, the quote-unquote slog of the Wheel of Time, which is basically books 7 through 10, where nothing really happens of major interest.
That's a lot of books.
It is, yeah. But like, I'm committed, and I know that the people have told me the payoff at the end is well worth it, and I've come this far, so I'm going to keep going. Anyway, this is a Nintendo show where we talk about video games, not fantasy books. I'm NBZ, as I said. I'm joined by Bally. How are you doing, Bally?
I'm doing well. I've not been outside a ton. I find like it just gets all the like running routes, walking routes, they just get really busy, and then you have to get up really early or go walking late at night, and I don't really.
And it's like this kind of game of dodgems where everyone's like trying to sidle each other and like you walk off the path on the road. It's a weird, like society has become really weird. Just very strange.
And I wish I was a little more close to like larger, like there are large green spaces near us, but like sort of more large green spaces that there are a little bit further outside Edinburgh. So
I get what you mean.
That's not great, but
we're pretty lucky in that we're very close to the sea, so we can walk by that or the water, call it the sea.
Yeah, and there's a few parks and
we literally have a park opposite our house, so that's very convenient.
Caroline likes to run around Arthur's Seat.
Oh, very good. Yeah,
that's a nice one. But again, like it's just a really busy running route. So
sure, that makes sense. Cool. Well, we have continued to keep ourselves occupied during everything going on with video games, and that's what we're going to be talking about with you all fine folks today. So, Bally, do you want to lay out the show?
3-segment show today. First segment, we're going to be talking about the games that we have been playing. The second segment, we've got some emails. And the third segment, we're going to chat a little bit about Breath of the Wild 2. We know it's a long way out, but we just kind of want to talk a bit about what we hope for and would like to see with that game. Maybe we could do a few predictions, some hopes, a bit of a combination, a little bit of a chat about that game. So
a betting segment, I don't know. Hopes and dreams. Just what we want that game to be. That's fun.
And when we want it to be.
Well, yeah, that's going to change a lot, definitely. Well, that's all good and fantastic. Let's kick things off then with video games. Everyone's still playing Animal Crossing, Bally. It just doesn't stop, does it? Like, it's one of those games that we just keep going with, and things have been happening. And Nintendo actually released a bit of an update. They put out a video where they're like, hey, here's some new stuff coming to Animal Crossing, which is pretty cool. I think that the way they have handled the kind of games as a service nature of this entry has been far better than they've done with a lot of kind of games that they've put out in recent times. And maybe to some degree you can argue that Animal Crossing just lends itself to this type of rollout, just because it's about playing through the whole year, and there's events that happen throughout the year. So you've got to have May Day, and you've got to have a National Earth Day. Is that what it's called? I don't know. With
like
Leaf
Nature Day, Earth Day.
Nature Day, Earth Day.
The real world one is called Earth Day, and that was like a couple of days ago, and I think that's when that Nature Day started. So I think it was tied into that, I guess.
It's like Bunny Day not being officially Easter. It's like Nintendo's kind of knockoff branded, versions of the actual holiday that they put into Animal Crossing, so as not to offend people and things like that. Which fair enough. And yeah, quite a few things that are coming. Red has been added to the game. I just had a quick chat with Red before we started recording and bought a very dubious painting off of him, which I'm gonna go and give to Blathers. Improve the museum. The museum gets expanded to have all those artwork pieces added to it. A few more things as well. The biggest one, I was watching this trailer, and I think a lot of people said this, but the one where I was like, oh shit, was when I saw bushes. And that's just very funny to me that, like, the thing with Animal Crossing that makes me the most excited is just like, here's a nice like hedgerow or like bushes to make my town look a bit nicer. I don't know. It's very weird because people get hyped up about like crazy shit in trailers and things like that, and that equivalent for Animal Crossing was like terraforming before the game came out, and now bushes, and it's like, why are people excited about this? But it's great.
In other games, it's like, this is a whole other chapter of DLC, but Animal Crossing, bushes. There we go.
Exactly. It's great.
I've been checking back in. I've finished sort of my terraforming project, which kind of enveloped 2/3 of my town, more or less. And now I'm just kind of thinking about what trees, what bushes, what I want to do with the area. I've kind of like, I got rid of that crappy bunny room in my house and like changed it into this kind of relaxing bath spa kind of
Zen spa room.
Spa with like, it's got like a little tea set and like a little cushion to sit on, and like
got some fragrant sticks in there,
incense sticks.
Even though you can't smell it, the vibe is there.
But just having like running water in your house without any music going, the sound is incredible. Like, it just sounds so soothing, so relaxing to actually just sit in there and do that stuff. So yeah, we need to do like a big furniture like crossover where we just order loads of furniture for each other and play with that, because I've got another couple of rooms I have no idea what I want to do with, really. So yeah, there's a lot to play with.
I have a piece of furniture I think you'll want. It's similar to your sofa at home. Your kind of
an L-shaped sofa.
L-shaped. It's not quite an L-shaped. It's a box corner sofa, which I think you can attach to other corners and then make it like a little bit more extended and things like that.
Yeah, because I think I want to make kind of like an arcadey style games room, living room, TV room, kind of downstairs in the basement,
with like pinball machines and arcade machines. Stuff like
just fun things to do and hang out, play some video games, maybe put the Switches down there, I guess, because I've got now the Animal Crossing themed one and the regular themed one. I've got them on either side of my bed, which I think is just like overkill. So,
a little bit. That's cool. I definitely want to make like a kitchenette / living area like in my upstairs room, because the upstairs and downstairs are both wider and longer, and they both kind of fit that vibe of like a large living space, which I think kind of a shared kitchen.
I've seen some incredible kitchens online.
Oh,
because all the stuff you can hang on the walls just makes it feel so much more real. Like it's
definitely the thing that has changed up my kind of appreciation for home decorating, is just having the wall stuff. It gives it so much more life and feels like a more lived in space, which is very, very cool.
You on top of bugs and fish for this season?
Yeah, I haven't, I've done a couple of times where I'm doing a check-in of I need to go get the turtle in the river that only spawns after 9 p.m. and there are a couple of pond fish that I went after, but I need to do a proper check because we're getting close to the end of April, and I don't know if there's anything leaving in April that I'm not going to be able to get.
There's only 4 things leaving in April, I believe, and they were stuff I think the hardest one to get leaving in April is like a tuna. Okay,
I got a tuna at the end of March, so
I think the rest are there for most of summer, honestly. But
that's good to hear, because I'm waiting on those sharks, man. I just want summer season is shark season, and that's where people just go crazy fishing, which is going to be a lot of fun. But I think now we've both kind of played the stock market, right? Like, we've had our fun, and I feel like I'm about to retire from the stock market. We've had some very good hookups recently. Nick, my friend Super Blah from the Pokemon days, has had some stupid luck where 2 weeks in a row he's had spikes of over 600 bells on his island, and because of all the people bringing him money, he now has 100 million bells in his account, which I'm just like, Nick, it's the most overkill of all time. You don't need that
because
much
the rest
money.
of his town, because he got the game a little bit late, doesn't have a whole lot of development. But
no,
it's just like
it looks like a very like impoverished town, right? Like he hasn't done anything to it, but yet it's just like he is fucking rolling in bells, and like someone gave him that Transformers robot. Someone just gave him the entire robot.
I was gonna say, I was like, he crafted it, but yeah, I guess someone could just give it.
Yeah, he told me. I was talking to him, and he was like, "Nah, I was like, did you just get all the ingredients to make it? Because people are dropping you gold nuggets and rusted parts." And he's like, "Nope, someone just dropped me the entire robot." And I was like, "Okay, cool." Like there is a benefit to having a high price in your town because you can just get people to give you a bunch of shit, essentially, as a tip for going to the town. So in any case, I'm sitting on like 4.7 million bells in my bank, and my current fruit setup allows me to make probably 250,000 every 4 days from fruit.
Wow,
so,
that's a lot. Yeah, I've chopped down a lot of my fruit trees, and my bank is feeling that. But I should get some more up and get them put in orchards, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah. And I've got, I think, 7, 8 bridges at this point, almost 8. I've got one more planned bridge to do for my main kind of circle river area, and then I'm going to start expanding out, because a lot of my island, as you know, the reason I'm making so much money from fruit is a lot of my island is just like fucking trees everywhere of just pouring of oranges and cherries, and
you're going to want to clear those out at some point.
I know I will, and at this point, like, I kind of have enough money to where I don't need to care about money anymore. I might do one more Stalk Market dive in, because there's a Nook Miles achievement for making 10 million off the Stalk Market, and my current number is 8.8 million I've made, so I can do that this week. Probably I can make over 1 million.
Honestly, the easiest way to make money, if you're just checking in every day without much effort, is to plant your tree with 10 grand. I think you get one a day, and then also find like the 8 to 10 grand you get out of a rock every day. If you do that every day, you're more or less making 40 grand a day through almost zero effort.
Yeah, that's like 3 minutes maybe of total time, maybe more, because you have to find the money rock. You have to hunt for it a little bit. I have destroyed a few rocks that have been in my way and have been annoying, and they respawn in different places, but for the most part, everything is looking good. And I've been enjoying Animal Crossing a lot more, Bally, for a very specific reason. Because, okay, so here's the thing. Joy-Cons are the worst controller Nintendo have ever made. Not in the fact that they are uncomfortable or they are unwieldy.
They're the best and the worst.
You could argue that, like, yeah, if you turn them on their side, that still it's a terrible thing how to play, you know. But it's fun if you have people near you and you want to do a quick co-op like Contra or some shit like that. Sure, that's fun. But the internals of the Joy-Con are just fucked up, man. Like, from day one, my Joy-Con had the issue where, remember, people had to send it in and, like, get foam installed into it to stop the wireless signal being interrupted, because if you held it behind your back and it would kind of lose a bit of connection. There were a couple of times, like, early on, the first few days of owning the Switch, where Link just kind of walked of his own volition in Breath of the Wild, and I didn't really think much of it, because for the most part, I was playing right next to my Switch, so I didn't have that issue. And so that was an issue, but also every launch Switch, and I think a lot of Joy-Cons that they still sell to this day, have the problem where the stick on the Joy-Con wears down, and eventually you get Joy-Con drift, which had happened to me probably about 1.5 years ago. It started, right, of like my left Joy-Con being a bit wobbly. And then eventually, I think maybe a few months ago, my right Joy-Con started doing the same thing. And so I have 2 Joy-Cons, which basically don't function properly and want to always point upwards or point downwards or point in some direction. And let me tell you, trying to play Animal Crossing and terraforming these precise little areas and doing it step by step.
It's very precise, isn't it? It's very easy to do. Even my Joy-Cons, which are near new, but like 1 year old now at this point, and they are... even then, like, you just have to be so precise to hit the right spot to terraform.
Yes, and it was driving me fucking crazy. I was just It was just the worst, and you wouldn't think Animal Crossing. Like I remember you were playing Cuphead in Japan when you got your new ones, and like that's understandable. Cuphead, a platforming game, very hard. You wouldn't think the thing that broke the camel's back would be fucking Animal Crossing, but it was. So I was talking to you. I'm always talking to you about how I hate how expensive these things are, and Nintendo aren't going to beat me, and fuck Nintendo for charging 70 quid for Joy-Cons.
I didn't know how you were going to win in this situation.
No.
I couldn't work it out.
There was no way for me to win, Bally. There was only losing in this scenario. So I was looking at a bunch of them. I looked at the Daemon X Machina ones, the giant kind of more like traditional controller style ones, which are really bulky and they have more of a grip to them on the sides. But looking into those, even though they got good reviews, they don't have rumble in them. And like rumble is such a core part of the experience for me. I really like rumble, and especially in Animal Crossing, when you're fishing or when you're doing anything, like it's very important to have that there for me. So eventually I was like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm just going to find the stupidest colors I can find and buy those instead. So I bought new Joy-Cons. I bought the weird like purple and yellow ones that they seem a different color in light and in dark, almost like the brightness on them or like the depth of their color is really weird. And they also, I don't know if your ones feel like this, but feeling the plastic on them, it's not really. There's a weird kind of not dryness, but almost not as smooth. It's more of a matte
finish than a shiny finish.
Yeah, it's not as smooth as the grey Joy-Cons I had at launch. And I don't know if your neon ones were more smooth as well.
I think that they did feel slightly rougher, but I think it might just have been because they were newer and the older ones had worn out a bit just from my hands. Like they can just get that matte sheen kind of comes off a bit to the point where it feels a bit shinier, if that makes sense.
Right, yeah. That makes sense, and I think that now I have, now that this has happened, I'm coming to these revelations about like I had been adjusting my play of Animal Crossing to account for me moving constantly, and so I still find myself like muscle memory like auto adjusting even though I don't need to anymore because my character will just stay in place and not move, but like it's broken me, right? It's really broken the way I play video games, and it's fucked up, man. It's fucked up. So GG Nintendo, you won, you beat me, and let's see how many years these last before they fucking break again, because God, I literally don't understand how they have made such a faulty product. It baffles me, and it still annoys me tremendously. The Nintendo can make something as good as the Switch and yet just fuck up on the hardware side for their controllers, which they never have done in the past. They have never, like, Nintendo, of all the companies, have the most rock solid hardware out there, and the Switch is just like, it's not up to their standard of quality.
I swore like companies like Nintendo, they'd essentially get a robot that would mash the analog stick around for like a given amount of time, and they would run tests on like 1 hour versus 2 hours versus 3 hours, and then they just testing the springs, testing this sort of thing,
or dropping Game Boys from like 3 stories up
from heights. Exactly. Like they cannot have had one of those robots testing out the analog sticks on the Switch without this surely happening on a given number. Or maybe the ones they tested on were not. It's like could be like a factory default or something, like it's not intrinsic to the design unanimously, but it does feel that way.
I mean, it is like the fastest turnaround Nintendo have had on a home console, because the Wii U, like out the gate, people knew, right, they're going to have to start working on a new thing real fast because their ship was sinking, they needed a new product, and Switch came out I guess it was technically 5 years after Wii U, maybe less. It's more like 4 years, 4 and a bit, because Wii U was end of 2012 versus like the start of 2017. So it was a little bit shorter than the usual cycle is for game consoles, which probably means that R&D just didn't have as much time to iron out some of the issues that they had. But anyway, now I am trying to be as very careful as possible with my Joy-Cons and just make sure they last.
How are you careful with a Joy-Con though? Like, how do you make sure you don't?
I don't
get
know.
Joy-Con drift.
Just like be gentle with it. I have no idea. Don't play Smash Brothers. Basically, don't do like the 3DS thing where people broke their fucking circle pads playing Smash Brothers. Terrible garbage.
Just be glad it happened on a standard Joy-Con and not on like a Switch Lite.
Exactly. Cool. And speaking of updates that Nintendo have done to their video games, they also dropped the quote-unquote final update for Mario Maker 2, a game that Nintendo has done fucking dirty, in my mind.
I'm so glad they finally added new game styles.
Yeah, no, that was exactly what everyone wanted. That plural that everyone was speculating detective work on, that worked out. Definitely we got some new game styles coming to the game.
And some new themes for the Switch.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, lovely. Black and white, finally a thing of the past. You can do a Samus Switch. No, of course, that would be a fantasy land that we would live in if Nintendo were to do any of those things. Because, yeah, I like talking about Animal Crossing and how good they've been at updating that game. And even some of their other games, like Splatoon, they did a great job after launch of like all the Splatfest and all that stuff. Mario Maker was just like, it was this weird situation where they kind of did fucking nothing. Like, they launched the game without the multiplayer, and then that came in an update. Then randomly in, like, December, I think, they put out the Link update. And then now they just put out this huge update with so many different things without, like, staggering them out, like, releasing them piece by piece, like, getting people to stay interested in Mario Maker. And I was listening to someone on a podcast talk about this, but, like, if you just look at the numbers, the story would be Mario Maker Switch is more successful than on Wii U, because the Wii U version sold 4 million and the Switch version sold 5 million. Which, to be fair, that's kind of a huge disappointment when you think about, like, the gap between Mario Kart 8 Deluxe and Mario Kart 8. You know, Switch versions of these Wii U games tend to do tremendously better, and yet only 5 million versus 4 million seems pretty weak for Mario Maker's standpoint. But the other part of the story is, like, the original Mario Maker had a much longer tail to it. The community lasted for a bigger amount of time. People were into that game for so much longer, and it feels like just people fell off a cliff with Mario Maker 2. It just kind of, everything about it dissipated and disappeared. And it's that is squarely on Nintendo's shoulders for doing such a poor job at updating that game consistently.
And not only have they been slow with these updates, and to be fair, most of them have been really cool when they come in. I think this most recent one is probably the best considerably. Like, there's a lot of cool stuff there. But yeah, they've never improved any of the quality of the life aspects to this game. Like, there's still some really clunky stuff in there when you just want to go in there, find a level, find a world, find whatever, or see the other levels that same creators made. Like, it's just very clunky. Entering these codes, it's not great.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, it's kind of one of those things that at this point they did the final. This is called the final update, so they're not going to be doing anything more to the game. So we kind of have to live with what we have. But that said, it did reinvigorate me in the sense that I saw a bunch of these things in the trailer and I was like, oh shit, these look like a lot of fun to play around with. And the one that really spoke to me was the bullet bill cap that you get in 3D World.
Really cool.
That one was like, oh shit, I have to make a level based around this. And so I proceeded to spend 3 days after the Mario Maker update came out just like binging level design essentially. And I was like, right, I'm going to make, because the worlds got added, right? So they added worlds to the game. So now you can string levels together in your own world. You can design the overworld, which is really cool. You can pick from different themes, whether it's like desert or sky or grass or whatever. And you can...
Can you pick between games for the overworld?
No, I believe the overworld is always going to be in that Mario World style.
Okay, I was wondering right.
It's always going to have that art style regardless. And I think that's mainly because that's the most famous overworld of all the Mario games. And the one that probably looks the nicest, right, is the Mario World edition of it.
Yeah.
And I'm fine with that. I think it works perfectly well. So it was cool to go in there and like add some mushroom houses, add like branching paths, and choose kind of, this is the route that people are going to take to get to the castle at the end. And so you can have a maximum of 5 levels, 4 levels just in the overworld, and then 1 level that's the final castle level. And my idea was basically, hey, there's a bunch of new things in this game. I want to make a world that builds around all these new ideas. So the 3D World palette was perfect for it because they added 5 new hats, essentially. 5 kind of blocks that you can put on Mario's head, and it changes the power up to something unique, like the Bullet Bill one, where you kind of... you float, or it's like a jetpack almost. It's like a sideways jetpack where you hover over the ground and it runs out eventually, like it sputters out. So you need to reset it by landing on the ground and then
It lasts quite a long time though, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does. It lasts a good amount of time. And so there's one with a cannonball head where Mario can shoot cannonballs, but if he holds down the button, it shoots them further. There's one which is a helicopter head, which is similar to the helicopter power-up in New Super Mario Brothers.
Yeah.
I remember I made a level like that on the original Mario Maker that used that suit.
I don't think they actually have it in 3D World. I think like
No.
these are new to this game.
Yes. Well, I think the helicopter head might be used in 3D Land, maybe. That might be a power-up from that game.
Yeah, maybe.
Potentially. I don't remember. But that one has 3 uses, and then it kind of disappears, but also you can drill down to the ground to like control your downways momentum. So that was an interesting thing I wanted to play with. And then we had the Goomba hat as well, which is a fun one. You put on a Goomba and enemies won't attack you. They'll just believe you're a Goomba. It's kind of like the masks in Breath of the Wild where you put on the Lionel mask and like slowly walk up to a Lionel and it doesn't attack you because it kind of thinks you're a Lionel. And the bokoblin hats and all that stuff that you could get, which is a really neat idea. So basically I took all these ideas for all these different hats and I made one level based around each of the 4 of them, and then the final level introduced the last hat at the beginning, and then the middle of that final level was much harder challenges with all 4 of the hats, and then the end of it introduced that final hat again with a bit more of a interesting challenge to it. And it just worked really well as a coherent, like, okay, I'm going to make an easy first level that builds these ideas, then it just keeps, hopefully the difficulty, like, worked out that it got a little bit trickier over time, but still was, like, teaching you about these new mechanics as you went through it, and then the final level was, here's the challenge, put all you've learned together, and kind of complete it all in one.
Yeah.
And I just had a great time just coming up with ideas. I was like going to sleep and being like, oh shit, tomorrow I need to do this and I need to add this part to it. There was one section in the helicopter box level I made which was inspired by Ori, which was like just this big open space with spikes everywhere.
Cool.
And like you have to float around it to get coins. There's 4 different coins, and it was inspired by Ori. It does it in Blind Forest and in Will-O-Wisps where you use the feather kind of hover.
Yeah, I didn't notice that at the time, but you're right.
Yeah, so that was very Ori inspired in terms of like collecting these little things around this very dangerous area without getting hit, which I thought was pretty cool, and I liked a lot of those little areas that I designed. It just got my juices flowing again. I was just very excited to get back into making Mario Maker.
Yeah, that feeling with Mario Maker when your juices are going, and I've not jumped back into any of the design creating stuff again. I did play your world and I loved it, but when your juices are going with Mario Maker, there's almost nothing like it. Like it is just, and you've been much better at getting back into that mode and doing more levels. And I find I don't know, I find it harder to just click my fingers and get back into that mode. Like I'm kind of too busy with other things right now to kind of go back into that, because as you said, like it often is like a 10-15 hour hole that like,
oh yeah,
either you're in that hole or you're not. And I've fallen into that hole a couple of times making other levels before, and it's like, it's very unique.
I think the thing I really like about the world, the setup of having worlds now instead of just levels, is it gave me this excuse to be like, well, I don't need to use every single square inch of both of these sub areas and main area, because in the past I've made Mario Maker levels that are so fucking long and take up every single possible part of the level, and I was like, no, I just need to make like, here's a shorter intro level, like don't like, be okay abandoning it early, right? Like, be okay just doing a few little challenges and being done with it, because what you don't realize is actually you're much better at your level than anyone else will be when they start it, because you know exactly what to do. And so you have to take into account it will take longer for these other people to play it because they're learning it as they go and they're kind of figuring out as they go, and they won't know the exact timing of jumps and they won't know all this stuff. So it's better to have more restraint. And the thing that helps with that is because I'm making 5 levels and I have this grand plan for 5 levels, I'm not just putting all my energy into this one level and then I feel exhausted because I've just used all my ideas in one place, right?
And you did well to keep them all like similar lengths, and I do think they are similar difficulties. Maybe the last few are a little bit harder.
Right.
But yeah, some really impressive ideas in there, especially like the one where you've got the head on where you can shoot balls essentially.
Yes.
And there's like, I can't remember what you call the name of the enemy. It's like
a charging bull guy who you have to like knock him off the thing in Mario 64, right?
Right. And you put him on an angled staircase, which meant that he was going up and down the stair, and then across, just a little gap across from him. And the gap's important because I followed there's two see-through tubes from 3D World that you have to shoot your balls into that then attack him around the corner. And I put myself into those tubes and I kept dying. I'm like, well, what am I meant to do here? And I realized, oh wait, of course, I'm meant to shoot the balls into the tubes to attack him. And then you had to estimate the height at which he was on like his staircase in order to go into one of the two pipes. Like, that was very impressive. Like, and there was a lot of stuff like that.
Yes, that was one of my favorite ideas I came up with because I realized that early on in that level, if you shoot the cannonball through a pipe, it doesn't break bricks. You can break bricks in front of a pipe, but if you shoot a bullet through the pipe, it won't break bricks on the other side. So I kind of wanted to do a thing where I opened up a thing, but I was like, oh wait, I can shoot through these things and they will come out the other side and hit enemies. What's an enemy I can use with this as an interesting idea? And like that tiered staircase, like doing up and down, so you have to jump and then hold the button to charge it so it goes far enough.
And then you just put a key in the enemy and then that's the lock. Yeah, like it works.
Right.
Yeah, totally.
Essentially, yeah.
Good.
So yeah, it was really fun coming up with all those ideas and just putting them down and like doing different kind of themes for them.
The bullet bill stuff was very fun to play. Like I think some of the
so
level design
fun.
was a bit simpler, but it's still simple but very good. Like it's just very fun, that timing to fly through the corridor and onto like the next platform.
Yeah, that was the one where I was like, this just feels good to do, so I'm just going to make some fun kind of like drop down here, go left, go right corridors to do, which are pretty easy to do, but they just feel good. And like as the other thing that I have started to do a lot more in my Mario Maker creations is just putting coins in places. Like it is a thing that doesn't really matter because ultimately I give you 99 lives in this world. Like I don't care about lives in Mario Maker. I think it's stupid, and I have always thought that lives should just be a thing of the past. And I just put coins in there for the purpose of it's a little dopamine hit when you collect them, right? It feels good in the rumble, it sounds great, and if you're like gliding along with the bullet bill and collecting coins, it gives you this kind of extra mini objective to do that you don't have to do, but it kind of, a lot of players will do it because it just feels good to do so.
It's also just nice. Yes, you can put arrows into signposts, but the coins are also very good to signposts. It's just like
exactly.
When you're moving through a level and your eye just catches, right, that's the coin. That's probably in the area I need to be right now.
Yeah, totally. It's a lot of fun. The one thing I will say is I think that there are quite a few drawbacks to the 3D World style in terms of it doesn't have certain things that I really like using. One of the most useful items I found in Mario Maker is the donut, which is an object that Mario can't pass through, but projectiles and enemies can pass through. And that's been really helpful if you want to do like a shooting gallery type thing. I used it on the Link level I made where you shoot the arrows and you need to shoot the arrows to hit coins to collect them, but Link can't go through the donut blocks. He gets blocked by them. You have to use the arrows to go through them. So I couldn't do anything like that because I kind of wanted to do a shooting gallery type thing with the cannonballs, but 3D World just doesn't have an object that has those properties, which is frustrating. And it also doesn't have just a pure spike block on its own that isn't affected by timing or by on-off switches. So I constantly, when I was doing spike blocks, I had to make sure that it was always at every opportunity either like correctly done for when you get from a checkpoint or from when you first enter the space to be on or off correctly. You can't just have a spike block permanently.
Are you sure?
Yes, because you either have the red one or the blue one, and if you're doing a level...
What about the yellow ones?
The yellow ones are timed, so they they withdraw the spikes for a brief period of time, so you can stand safely on them, and then they shoot out like at timed intervals.
You're right. Those are the three types. It's the red, blue, and yellow. Right?
Yeah, and there's no one by one kind of spike block that you get in all the other tile sets, right? That's just like you can just land on it.
It's a 2x2.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a little frustrating that I had to do a lot more messing around with timing and making sure that everything lined up properly. For if someone died at the checkpoint, then it would have to lock them in order for them to press the on switch so that it would activate the spikes properly, because otherwise they just run across it and not have to worry about it. A lot of like weird like these levels, they seem very simple. The time that goes into like the fine tuning on like every single little jump and area, it's so much more than you think it's going to end up being. And to make 5 levels did take probably 12 to 15 hours total for me. I wasn't keeping track, but that's the other thing about Mario Maker is there is no game in history that evaporates time like Mario Maker. Simply nothing. It is just stupid how you blink and you're like 3 hours later. It makes no sense.
But it's one of those things that while your juices are flowing, you want to get the idea completed, because if you sleep on it or leave it. Well,
sometimes sleeping on it helps, right? Like sometimes you'll come up with a better idea.
When it's going, you just want it to go until it's done. Basically, like you just want to get to the finish line a bit.
Yeah. Any of these kind of new things that they've added inspired you at all to make some level in Mario Maker? Anything that you want to try out?
Yes. If I wasn't in the middle of 2 JRPGs right now, I think I would probably
yeah, sure, fair.
Dive in. It's just I am conscious that these are both games I really want to beat right now, and I would like to jump. I always want to jump back into Mario Maker at some point. It's just finding the right time, the right place. Did you try sending your world to like any streamers, or is the streaming scene more or less dried up? Or
no, I mean I think this update has rejuvenated it. It's definitely, there's a lot more smaller streamers doing Mario Maker at the moment, which is good, because it's like I go to Twitch, search by lowest view count, and just go for the smallest people possible to try and get my levels played. And it's definitely harder when you have a world, right? Because the streamer has to commit to 4/5 levels, because a couple of them just skipped one of the levels because I made it optional, which is fine. Like, I made it optional just for fun, and I think you should play all the levels in my world, because that's the best experience. It will teach you all the mechanics leading up to the end. But I did it just because it was the option to do a fork in the road, and I felt like it was a fun thing, and put 2 mushroom houses on the other side if you got to the warp pipe. But yes, a couple of people played through the whole thing, and they seemed to enjoy it. They seemed to think like, hey, this is like a well-designed world, and it was, better than, because so many people who stream this game get sent stupid hard fucking Kaizo shit, and a lot of people just don't make good levels, right? Loads of people just make levels that are infuriating and badly designed, and one of the streamers was talking about that, about how like he has trouble deciding like, when do I stop playing someone's level? Like, do I dedicate 20 minutes to this level even if I'm hating it because this person sent it to me, or what? And so it's interesting, and it's an interesting balance there. But yeah, it's cool. It's cool to see people playing your levels. It's even cooler when you have like multiple of them, so you can just send loads of them all around the place. It's great fun. So yeah, that's Mario Maker 2. The other thing that I finished up, and I can't remember, Bally, did I talk about the original Spyro the Dragon, the HD re-release on the show?
I can't remember when, but I think you did, yes.
Because I played it over a Christmas break like 2 years ago, and I don't remember if, because we're in between like Game of the Year shows and stuff like that. I can't remember if I actually talked about it on the show. But I did. I have the Spyro Reignited trilogy. I played the first game, and
on PlayStation 4.
Yes, you have the Switch version, right? Because Caroline has the Switch version.
Yes, Caroline has played the first 2 games and sort of gave up near the end of the 3rd game, I believe. But I'm going to definitely jump in and probably start with the first game at some point, yeah. Cool.
Yeah, Spyro has always been, for me, my favorite original PlayStation game. Like, it's the one that I played the most when I was younger, and like playing through the original again, I was really surprised how much I remembered and how far I had actually gotten in that original game, because I basically got to the last world back in the day, which is...
Was it Insomniac who did the remake?
No, so the remake for Spyro was done by Toys for Bob, who I believe worked on some Disney Infinity stuff. That might be incorrect, I'm not 100% certain, but they did the remake, and it was Vicarious Visions who did the Crash remake, I believe. So they're both done by different studios, but they're both really good versions. And the Switch versions of both of them are really good as well. Like, having played the Crash Switch edition, that's an excellent port. I don't know, have you seen Caroline playing Spyro on the Switch? Can you speak to like the quality of that version?
Yeah, it runs really well. It looks really smooth. I can't tell 30 versus 60 frames.
Sure,
honestly.
yes.
I've decided I'm just good at telling whether something is smooth or not. I can't actually tell.
Right, yeah. Yeah, and that's a lot easier to
60.
point out. Like frame pace, even if you don't know the lingo of what frame pacing is, it's a lot easier
Right.
to notice when that is bad and when it's not, essentially.
Sure.
But yeah, so Spyro, the original, I loved. I platinumed it. It's the only game that I have properly platinumed. I have 2 platinums. The other one is The Walking Dead Season 1, but you get the platinum just for playing that game. If you just beat the game, you get the platinum. So that's not really an actual platinum. The first Spyro, I went after it. And I say that because I kind of thought I might do the same with sequels, and I'm disappointed to say that Spyro 2 did not inspire me to do that at all. It's really weird. I think a lot of people think Spyro 2 is the better game, superior to the original, and there are lots of ways in which it certainly is more impressive, right? There are a lot more levels, and they are way more unique. Like each level you go to starts off with a mini cutscene where it shows this enemy and they're having problems between them, and there's some kind of conflict going on, and it's kind of little comedy skits that happen before you enter, and they're all completely different. Every world you go to, new enemies, new designs, new areas that go from like loads of different places and kind of ideas, and that's really cool. I thought the variety was fantastic, but where it falls down for me is a lot of these levels have added kind of meaningless side stuff where you, alongside getting all the gems, you now have these orbs that you have to collect. And to get the orb, you have to do like a mini game where you're in a minecart shooting things in front of you, or you have to skate on the skating rink and shoot a hockey puck into a goal 5 times, or you have to chase down these dinosaur eggs that keep hatching and are about to eat people, but you have to flame them all before they eat people. And some of them are fine and easy and they're okay, but a lot of them are frustratingly difficult and annoying and not well designed. There's one near the end of the game where these little turtles will spawn, and the turtles are trying to cook themselves alive, essentially. They're trying to jump into this boiling pot in the middle of this kind of square arena, and you have to stop them by flaming them and then pushing them off the side. The first version of this is very easy. There are only like 4 or 5 turtles. They come out quite slowly, and you push them off the side. I'm like, okay, let's try the harder version, right? The original version is like 2-star difficulty. The next one's 4-star. And, like, they send, like, fucking 25 turtles at you in very short space of time, and they're all, like, crowding around the pot, and it's a fucking nightmare, and it's, like, impossible. So, like, getting the orb on a lot of these things was just not worth it for me. And the other thing is the game doesn't really tell you that you need to be going after these things. They are positioned as optional collectibles if you want to do them. And lo and behold, you get to the final world of Spyro 2, and the final boss is locked behind 40 fucking orbs. And by that point, I got into there, and I'd been doing some along the way. I'd collect orbs when I felt like it, and I had 18 by the time I got to the final world. I was like, oh, for fuck's sake, this is shit. Like,
That is a lot. That is 22 orbs behind.
Yes, I was very, very behind, and it got really frustrating because I was like going to all these new worlds, and I was like, well, I've got to get every orb here, I guess. And some of them, I think some of the worlds are just much harder to get the orbs than others. There's one that's an underwater one that's the other thing. The underwater controls in this game suck. Like, fair enough, in the first game, if you landed in water, Spyro couldn't swim, he just drowned. Any body of water you fell in. Whereas in this game, you can swim. And I was like, okay, that's kind of neat. But then I realized, oh no, the swimming controls are awful, and they haven't updated them at all, and they feel very tricky to navigate and just not intuitive. So any underwater levels, I was like, I don't want to spend more time here than I need to. So I ended up like not getting orbs in those places. But, you know, I looked up a guide online, and there are orbs that are situated in the hub areas. So the interesting thing is the original Spyro has maybe 5 or 6 hub areas, maybe 7, and there are much fewer worlds, and maybe 3 or 4 worlds per hub area, versus this game, there are 3 hub areas, but each hub area has like 11, 12 worlds in it.
Jeez.
So there's a lot more like exploration around the sub area. And the other thing is that you can unlock abilities now. So you can unlock a ground pound. You can unlock the ability to climb up ladders. So there are, and there's a new added thing that's just part of Spyro's toolkit now, where if you glide somewhere and he can't quite make it, you can press triangle and you do a little flutter to get yourself up to the top of the ledge, which has been helpful in certain areas. But yeah, I found all the orbs in the hub areas, which helped me close the gap. And then, funnily enough, every time you finish a world, the NPC at the end gives you a artifact type thing, and once you get all the artifacts in a world, then you open up the portal to the next one. At the final world, you don't need any artifacts anymore because there's no portal to open up. So they give you an orb just for finishing the level. So there's like 6 or 7 levels in the final world, and you get an orb for just finishing those, which is good. Like, that kind of bumped my total up a bit. And then I just went back and cleaned up some of the earlier easy levels to get some. And honestly, here's the thing. I was very much put off by this, and it came at a good time because I got to that point as soon as Final Fantasy VII Remake released. So I had a week of just playing Final Fantasy VII Remake, 40 hours into that, had a great time, and then I came back to Spyro, and I was like, all right, let's do the Spyro thing. Like, it was good to have a break from it to, like, come back, and then it turned out it only took me, like, an hour and a half to get all the orbs, so it wasn't that bad in the end. It just seemed much more intimidating than it was, and it was annoying. So I did fight the final boss. It's a bad final boss. It's 3 phases. There's no checkpointing between the phases, and it's annoying, but I beat it, and I finished Spyro 2. And yeah, I don't know, it didn't strike me as being as well designed or as interesting as the first game overall. Despite all these improvements and things like that, it feels like it was a bit too over-padded for me.
But did it help that the first game probably had more nostalgia?
That is the thing I find hard to separate, right? It's really difficult because in my mind I'm like, I don't know, maybe this is a better game. Maybe I just don't like it because I don't know it as well.
My understanding is the first game's a lot simpler, a lot shorter.
Yeah.
And,
they're actually around the same length overall.
Okay.
The thing I like about the first game is that the dragons you collect, they're just about exploration and finding them. They're not about doing stupid tasks, right? It's about using your gliding abilities and like figuring out the level layout to get to the place. And to unlock the dragon, you just walk onto it and he cracks open and he's like, Spyro, here's a tip. Eat spaghetti with pasta. And I don't know, they say really stupid lines that make no sense and like out of context. But that's why I like that system, is because it's very, like, the only real collectible that's annoying in the first game are the stupid egg guys who go na 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 and just fucking run around, and they'd suck. Like, they'd fucking haunt my childhood. But this one just felt like all that side stuff was a bit more annoying. And I think the first game has a little bit of this as well, but there are areas where you go through a kind of archway, and the archway gives you infinite flight, so you can fly around and shoot things in the air, or the archway gives you a super powered flame, so that there are certain enemies that you can only kill with those.
Yeah. Those, from watching Caroline, seem like the hardest thing in the game.
Yeah, they're definitely the more tricky challenges, for sure. They're fine, and that's the thing. I do think this was an era of video games where they started to realize, we can just put more in it, and people will like it because it lasts longer, right? Like, that's the way to make video games better, just to put more, just pad it out, right? And I think we've come kind of back around on that point at this juncture, where I just don't like that type of game design anymore. It doesn't really speak to me. And yeah, I don't know. It's cool. Like, this was the game that introduced like Hunter the tiger and like the foal, I can't remember her name, and these other like Spyro universe characters that then went on to be in all the spin-offs, like the Season of Ice that we played and things like that. So it definitely expands.
I had a GameCube game that I can't remember the name of that I played.
It was the first Spyro GameCube game that wasn't made by Insomniac. It was made by someone else.
Yeah, it was okay.
Yeah, I remember playing some of that at your place. But yeah, kind of bummed out that I didn't enjoy it as much as the first game. But again, it's really hard to separate nostalgia and really know what I think, because when I played through the Crash games, again, I thought Crash 2 was the best of them, or it was the one I had the most fun with. I think maybe Crash 3 is the best potentially, but also Crash 3 has a bunch of like weird mini games and like underwater sections and driving sections that weren't that interesting. But
are you up for Spyro 3 then, or are you gonna?
Yeah, I'll play it.
Distance.
I think this is different from Crash because I don't know. There's something about the Spyro games where I play them and I'm like, okay, that's enough. Like, I'm kind of done. Even though I enjoy the Spyro games way more, maybe it's the fact that they are much more open and explory and not just linear levels that it makes it harder for me to jump straight into another one, you know? Like, I will play the third game. It'll probably be a little while. I'll give it a rest until I feel like it. Yeah. And then the last thing I want to talk about is Cat Girl Without Salad, Amuse Bouche, which is... So Way Forward back in 2013 released this game, I believe, on Steam, and it was like an April Fool's joke. Basically, the entire game was an April Fool's joke, and
that's a long time ago.
Yeah, and so they finally, for April Fool's this year, they released it on Switch, and they sent me a code, and I was like, all right, let's check this out. This thing seems weird, and the whole thing probably takes about 45 minutes to an hour. It's very, very short. It's a side-scrolling shooter. And it's really fucking chatty. Like, you plays this cat girl in space. Her name is Kabako. And the entire level you play, like, there's just non-stop dialogue between these characters. And it's just very, like, anime and kind of over the top and kind of cartoonish. It's some of it is funny. A lot of it is very grating. I don't know. A lot of the time I just ended up listening to something else while I was playing it. But as a side-scrolling shooter, there's only 3 levels. The levels are really quite long, and they all have a boss at the end of them. But the most unique thing about it is that there are a bunch of weird guns that you get. One of the guns is an RPG gun, where you have a menu, and if you like scroll down the menu with your buttons, you can choose magic, which will throw out some magic potions as projectiles. You can choose attack, which Kabako will just like move forward and like wave her sword like a turn-based animation in Final Fantasy, and it will automatically like do damage to the enemy. You can run. You can choose the run option, which will like scoot you back and almost dodge you out the way. And there's another one I can't remember. Another one of the guns is a Pac-Man gun, where you shoot it, and after you shoot it, you use the face buttons to control the direction of the Pac-Man. So the Pac-Man just goes around the screen and like eats up enemies instead of like you shooting bullets. There's a Mega Man gun. You shoot out a little platformy guy, and as you shoot him out, he runs across the screen, and you can press A for him to jump, and he jumps just like Mega Man, and he can jump into enemies and hit them. So there's so many weird ideas here for these guns and these weapons. The unfortunate thing is if you get hit once, the weapon disappears and you have to wait until you pick up another one. There's one which is like Dance Dance Revolution, where in order to fire it, you have to play the pattern of the dancing mini game as it goes across the bottom of the screen. So you have to do like up, down, left, right and stuff like that. And you're still controlling your, like the left analog stick controls your character, and you're using the face buttons to do a lot of these inputs for the attacks, like either scrolling through menus or moving them around on screen like a Pac-Man or whatever. So it is a little bit of like pat your head, rub your stomach at the same time, because you're doing these two things at once. But it's quite fun. It's like very short, so know that going in. It's kind of just like a joke almost. It is an April Fool's joke, but surprisingly, for an April Fool's joke of a video game, it's pretty competent, and like it feels good to play, and there are fun enough ideas in there. And as a side-scrolling shooter, as someone who's pretty bad at that genre, it's pretty forgiving. Like it's definitely tricky, but they give you enough health, and they give you opportunities where you can recover your health frequently enough where, you know, I had a good time with it, and it was very much like I played one level at a time. I kind of spent 15-20 minutes, played a level, put it down, and then like the next day I'd come back and play it. And yeah, you can beat it in one sitting, but I think it's maybe a little overpriced for what it is. I saw it was $7.99 on the US store, so maybe it'll probably go in a sale for like $2 or $3 at some point. So yeah, I liked it. It's very strange. Its name is very hard to remember. It's stupid, but hey, that's what you get. Cat Girl Without Salad, Amuse Bouche. I'm almost surprised Square Enix didn't make this game, because it's kind of the level of nonsense that they usually lean into. So yeah, I enjoyed it. That, however, is going to close out our first segment. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back after the break with some of your emails.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the show. It's the second segment and that means it's time for emails, but the well has gone dry, MBZ.
It's so dry. I'm thirsty down here,
Bally.
Bally.
In weeks and it's getting bad. It's getting real bad.
How will we survive without emails?
I don't know. I have no idea. But we would really appreciate it if you could spend us a few minutes of your time, send in a question, send in an email.
Bally, you won't get this reference, but I am Goku right here. I'm standing. Send me your spirit energy. The spirit bomb is in the making. I need your spirit energy of emails to create this spirit bomb of emails. Thank you, everyone, please.
Please send them to ThisNintendoLife at gmail.com. That is ThisNintendoLife at gmail.com. Or send us a tweet. At TNL Podcast. You could tweet at us. You could join our Discord server. Post in the email thread on there. There's a link to that Discord server on our Twitter account in the description of this show in the show notes. So check that out. We would really appreciate questions, comments, feedback. We love it. It's great. It keeps the show on the road and it makes for an even better email segment next time. So our first email this week is from B King, who is from Sweden. Hey guys, I recently got Ring Fit Adventure and I must say that I was really impressed by it. The game is very well designed and thought out to keep you motivated while at the same time being clear about how to perform each exercise and how you shouldn't overdo it in order to get the most out of the workout and not injure yourself. I was mostly impressed by how well the Ring-Con itself worked and just how versatile the Joy-Con are. It's honestly pretty amazing how much Nintendo managed to put into those tiny controllers. Who knew they could actually measure your heart rate? So Beaking then talks about sort of a video about Spawn Wave and about breaking down the tech inside Ring Fit. The most interesting part about this, though, is that he mentioned that Nintendo actually had used a similar technique with a flex sensor back in the NES era for the Power Glove. He later continues by speaking about how this shows that Nintendo often look back at ideas from the past and try to see how they can use similar technology but in different ways. I find this pretty interesting to look at and also very exciting to think about what more Nintendo could come up with by reusing old ideas and implementing them into new creations. What are some ideas or types of technology from Nintendo's past that you would like them to revisit and maybe use in some different way to come up with new peripherals or gimmicks in the future? I'm looking forward to the next episode. Keep up the good work. Greetings from Sweden.
Okay. Yeah, it's I didn't realize that the Ring Fit actually had a bunch of tech in it that did all this interesting stuff, because you look at it and you're like, oh, it's just a ring, right? I think a lot of people were speculating that surely the Joy-Cons are doing most of the work here. Like, why is it so expensive to buy?
Yeah, a bit like Labo, right? It kind of just, it's the Joy-Cons sensors picking up the stuff that feeds back into the game.
Yeah, totally. And it's really interesting, right? I think Nintendo often come back round to technology and like reuse it. I think the most famous one, at least the one that I often hear about the most, is how 3D was initially going to be on the GameCube until they decided it wasn't going to work and had to wait until it was much more commercially viable, and therefore the 3DS became a thing because they could make their own screen which had glasses free, and it kind of worked out in that sense. And to some degree, like, Virtual Boy has come back around as well in terms of Labo VR, right? Like, it's not Nintendo going whole hog into VR, because I think Virtual Boy definitely burned them back in the day. But it's cool to think about, like, what would Nintendo do with a full VR setup if they were to make another standalone product like the Virtual Boy was back then, and how it would work. Like, do you kind of see this era of Nintendo like reaching back into the archives and be like, okay, our new VR thing is gonna look like the Virtual Boy and the Power Glove, and like you use the Power Gloves as controllers, like standing there like this kind of, technology person almost, dressed in old Nintendo apparel and technology.
I think the frustrating thing with VR, we've talked about it before, is that it is the tech holding them back a little bit. It's difficult to see them doing more than just dabbling in it like they kind of have with Labo VR, because VR is in a strange place where the best things on the market are really high entry costs, and then the more mainstream PSVR doesn't hold up in comparison to like a lot of those other experiences. And then we've obviously got a next generation of consoles coming out that we know that Sony are going to continue VR, and it's about, I just don't think anything that Nintendo does in that market makes any big waves whatsoever. I don't think Labo VR particularly made huge waves, as cool as that thing is. So I think what Nintendo are good at is stuff like Ring Fit, where it is that kind of Wii Fit, Wii Sports style of thing. I can totally see Nintendo going back to this whole sports model in some way. Maybe not with a Switch, maybe with the next Switch, or maybe down the line. But I just think that we've said before, Nintendo always like to keep their toe dipped into that crazy mainstream, everyone buys a Wii kind of market that arguably Ring Fit sales-wise is tapping into a little bit, and that's helped by the fact the Switch is selling very well. But it seems like it's critically a very good game, a very good product. And I do think Nintendo will constantly dip back into things. I just don't think I think that's going to be more like Wii Sports and Wii Fit than it is going to be something VR related, just because of the positioning of where VR is right now in the industry.
It's funny to think about how much, in terms of the peripherals Nintendo have made over the years, have lent into the idea of getting people exercise and fit and things like that, because obviously you have Wii Fit, which is a big deal. Even the Wii, when it first started, was, get off the couch, swing your remote around, play tennis. But even before that, they were doing stuff like, or maybe this was after the Wii, because this was during the DS era as well. They had the Poker Walker when you bought Heart Gold and Soul Silver. So it was encouraging people to go outside and take their Tamagotchi-style Pokemon with them to collect items and things like that. And have Ring Fit, you had their initial pitch for like a sleep device that would sit next to you, which is now being rolled into Pokemon Sleep, I believe, whenever Pokemon Sleep releases. Who knows what that is going to be or how that works, and is Pokemon Sleep even going to actually come out, right? Like, because it feels like one of those ideas or one of those products that Nintendo had ideas for back when they were just flopping during the Wii U era, and they needed to invest in other parts of like different ways to make money, and so the fitness market, the health market seemed like one of those avenues that they had experience in that they could potentially go down a bit more.
I think they would go down that path again through something similar to Street Pass. I just think, yes, that's not like that's more like a software, not hardware, or like an add-on or any sort of...
But I mean, that's another great example of Nintendo encouraging people to walk around by rewarding them for walking around, essentially.
Totally. And the Switch obviously is this kind of strange hybrid, and the Switch Lite is far more focused on the sort of handheld only aspect. And if Nintendo keep going for the hybrid, which I hope they do, maybe they see it as difficult to argue that they want to focus so much software into something that is so focused on the handheld component. But then again, if you own a traditional Switch, there's nothing to stop you from putting it in your rucksack and still getting the benefit if they did have software that was a bit like Street Pass. So I think that is something that was so unique to Nintendo, so innovative, so cool, that I'd love to see them return to.
Yeah, it's for me, when I think about weird technology that Nintendo talked about and then never did anything with, the one that always comes to the front of my mind is the vitality sensor. Like, what the fuck was the vitality sensor? What was it supposed to do? What were their game ideas behind it? Like, obviously, Nintendo don't really make horror games, and like the vitality sensor seems like the thing that would be custom made for a horror experience in order to like see what the heart rate is of the player and like throw them jump scares when it would most elevate it and things like that. So ultimately, I don't know how they would use that outside of that setting for like game design, but it was just this weird thing that like you put your finger inside it, and I think they cited they couldn't get it to work with 100% of people. Like they said it would only work with 90% of people, and that wasn't good enough for them. They wanted it to work universally across the board, so they kind of abandoned it and never did anything with it. But there must be a more streamlined way of doing that, because that was literally, back in the day with the Wii, you'd plug in a bunch of peripherals into the slot at the end of the Wii remote, and the vitality sensor was going to be one of those where you plugged it in and you put your finger in it, and that kind of takes your other hand away, so you'd have to have a game where you only controlled it with one hand with the Wii remote, which plenty of games did do that, but I don't know what kind of thing you do. Maybe a Fatal Frame, right? Like on rails Fatal Frame, where you're just pointing and taking pictures of ghosts and things. That would probably be the thing that would most make sense with it. But yeah, I don't know what the hell they would have done with the.
Yeah.
It's one of those like products that I just don't like. It can come back, and I have no idea how they would use it. Right.
One thing I'd love to see in a Switch 2 is the ability to play linked to a TV like a Wii U. And
okay.
Yes, the Switch is fantastic. I love it. The Wii U had massive flaws. I get that. But experiences like even the Wind Waker remake or Pikmin 3, where maps are put onto the second screen, added functionality is added that you can swap between the two screens, you can still play handheld only. Like, there was that seamless aspect to, say, the Wind Waker remake, where you could play on... There were different modes of playing. You could play with Link on the top screen, map on the bottom screen. You could play with Link on the bottom screen, map on the top screen, I even believe. And you could swap these around. I just think that there's a lot of functionality, especially when we talk about like third-person games and HUD-less perspectives, where you can just put all the information you need in JRPGs or maps or whatever it is on the bottom screen, all the move sets, whatever you need to see, and then you can just present a really visually interesting world without any added HUD on the top screen. Like, that's something that I think would be really appreciated in a future Zelda, a future Metroid, or whatever. Like, I think there are really cool, innovative things you can do with that extra screen that I would love a second Switch to do.
Yeah, I think we're just weird, Bally. I think no one actually cares about that outside of people who like the Wii U, which is like clearly a very select and small audience. And yeah, I totally get where you're coming from, because again, like we get used to that idea, especially with the DS and the 3DS. For years and years, you have this screen real estate to work with where you can like take things and put them into a separate space. So, you know, maybe the potential is that they bring dual screens back for another Switch version, which would be weird. Like, imagine a giant sandwich Switch that had multiple screens on it. I think it would be a little bit too unwieldy and probably not make a lot of sense. But, you know, there are lots of phones these days that have foldable screens, right? I don't know if that would be something Nintendo ever gets into or is interested in, that type of technology. Potentially could be a thing that they look into.
Glasses free 3D ever coming back?
I wish it would. Obviously, you know, evangelists on this show as we are, it'd be great. Like, I think it would be,
because you think about the resolution of, say, the Switch versus the 3DS, and it's not night and day. That's harsh, but like,
kind of is.
Say the next Switch were down the line, the resolution.
Just compare New Leaf on 3DS to New Horizons. It is kind of night and day. Like, there's been a bit of a leap there.
It's just because you can up-res that glasses-free technology. Like, it's not the resolution that's holding it back necessarily. Like, it's just...
No.
There's really cool stuff I think you could do down the line.
I just think people don't care anymore, you know? And ultimately, you have to think about this from a wider perspective of, like, the consumers that care about Nintendo. What do they care about? They care about Nintendo video games. Are they good? And ultimately, that's what it's come down to, is... Do they, first of all, do they have an appealing piece of hardware, right? Which they finally have one. Second of all, are there enough games on it that people want to buy it? They've kind of done that with the third-party support they have and the indies. And obviously, does it have the Nintendo games I want to buy? Yes. And I think adding 3D doesn't move the needle for the vast majority of people, right? Like, that's such a small subsection of an audience. As much as we love it, it just doesn't make financial sense for them to do so.
It would need a killer app. It would need something that makes the whole industry go, whoa, you can only do this in this 3D mode, and you must buy this game if you buy the system, sort of thing.
And I think ultimately 3D still exists. It's just moved to VR now. VR is just the area where 3D has become more important.
Yeah, and 3D's almost vanished in a 2D setting, as weird as that sounds. What am I trying to say? In a screen setting, a traditional screen setting.
Right, like the fewer and fewer movies come out these days that have 3D options to them. They still happen, right? But like, it's more of a case of the cinema wanting to make more money on a 3D version because you have to pay more for the ticket price versus anything.
And I don't even think these films are shot in 3D anymore. It's literally just them duplicating the film, which is like the laziest thing possible. Whereas back in the day, how was Avatar now? Back in the day, it's 2009.
It was over 10 years ago.
It was like films like that were actually shot with 2 cameras on set. So it makes a big difference in theory.
Totally. Yeah.
But yeah, good question, Beaking. Hopefully we'll see some more creative Nintendo come back. Ring Fit is a nice change from some of the more traditional aspects of the launch of the Switch.
Totally. Yeah.
Cool. So next question is from Micaiah, who's from England. Hi guys, I've been thinking about the current state of Mario games on the Switch after playing some Mario and Sonic games round at friends. Perhaps it's nostalgia making me think the previous titles are better, or even the very high quality of games on Switch, but for me, sports and party Mario titles constitute all of the most disappointing Switch releases. Contrast this, for example, with the GameCube Mario spin-off. Some of the most fun games on the system are stuff like Mario Strikers, Mario Party 4, 5 and 6, Mario Power Tennis, and Double Dash. Even Toadstool Tour had its moments, and Baseball has a surprisingly fun story with a lot of side modes too. So with that out of the way, I get to my question. Do you think these series have declined in quality, and what direction would you like to see these games take in the future? Micaiah from England.
Very good. Bally, you're the expert here, right?
Yeah, I've got a lot to say about this.
Yeah.
I wouldn't bunch them all together. I think you're talking about Mario Party titles, you're talking about Mario Sports titles, and you got even thrown in Mario Kart in there with Double Dash. I think we've talked enough about Mario Kart and our views on that on the show, I think. So I don't want
you can call Mario Kart a spin-off. Technically it is a spin-off,
it is a
but
spin-off.
it's also the best-selling Nintendo franchise.
The spin-off that is bigger than the original.
Yeah, like Mario Kart's more popular than regular Mario. That's how important it is.
I think Mario Kart is evolving fine. It's doing well. I love Mario Kart 8.
There's an argument to be made that it's stagnated, right? 7 and 8 are basically, like, they're so similar.
I agree. I think Wii 7 and 8, they've all got a lot of overlapping aspects, and obviously Double Dash is very unique, very interesting. I still love it.
I would say, like, DS and Double Dash was the era when Mario Kart was his most interesting, right?
Absolutely.
You had, like, the giant weapon mechanic and the 2 drivers, but then DS also had mission mode, and then after that they were kind of like, well, let's just take out these interesting things and just make it kind of the same thing but more polished.
There's the potential to like smashify, as we've said. There's the potential to throw back in duos on carts. There's the potential to throw back in the mission mode. I think there is a lot of room where the current format can go. As polished and almost perfect as Mario Kart 8 is in many ways, I think there's still lots you can do with that series. And that's actually the healthiest series by a mile out of everything discussed here, honestly. So I think we're good for that. In terms of let's go on to party games. So yes, I own and loved Mario Parties 4, 5 and 6 on the GameCube. I've not dipped back into Mario Party since then. From everything I've followed in reviews and things, I appreciate that those seem to be not as good games. And I know that
I don't know. Having played Mario Party 4 within the last month, because I'm back home, my sister wanted to play Mario Party. We played a 10-turn round of Mario Party 4. We set the CPUs to normal. We played with, I think, Daisy and Donkey Kong, maybe. And no one got a single star in the game itself. Daisy was an idiot and did something stupid to make sure she didn't get a star. And then at the end of the game, Daisy won because she got the most happening spaces. So Mario Party's always been bullshit. What I will say is I think the mini games are still kind of fun, right? Like there's still a decent amount of good game design in there. Like I don't know, like maybe that's going being a bit too generous about it.
Yeah, I totally think I'm very nostalgic for that series. Out of 4, 5 and 6, I actually played perhaps the most of 5, and I played a lot of that at university, and I think those mini games are very strong. I think the mini games in 6 are strong. I think 4's minigames are good, but I do think the minigames in 5 and 6 are slightly better, as much as there are good games in 4. I have no reason to believe that Mario Party's, what are we on, like 7, 8, 9, 10? I don't think the
We're
minigames...
on Super Mario Party. They've basically rebooted it now with the Switch games.
Right, it's just
so now they can
numberless.
do Super Mario Party 2, Super Mario Party 3, right?
Right. So I don't actually think from what I've seen that those minigames are any worse, and it is a lot to do with just the party structure not being great.
I think the thing that really has killed the new Mario Party in terms of my interest in it is the boards have no life to them. They're so tiny and small, and they don't have the character that, like, one of the levels we played, for example, was the Copacabana beach, where there's this beach hut that's being built in the center, and you can go left or right, and you can slip on bananas left or right, and there's like a top area, and all the, like, there's a character and a identity to each board, and each of them have their little kind of gimmicks to them. Whereas the newer Mario parties, either they're in the stupid car where everyone's just in the whole thing together, and it's not the same as Mario Party, or it's the new one where there's not really a lot of interesting going on the map itself, and like there's limited amounts of items. It's not much interesting happening on the meta perspective of, like, not just playing the mini games.
Yeah, totally. And I don't feel comfortable buying like a 40 quid game just to play some mini games I can only enjoy locally.
Well, let me tell you, Val, you can do that for Mario Party, the top 100 on 3DS for $40 for the mini games.
Right. It's just, so I've not, I guess I have personally given up on Mario Party more or less. Yes, there's so many things that people have said of how that series can improve that we've already mentioned, and I feel not great about that series, honestly.
Would you say it's in decline, or do you think that Super Mario Party has maybe brought a bit more hope to people? Because Super Mario Party, it's one of the best-selling Switch games. It sold 9 million copies.
It sounds really good. I think it does some really cool things minigame-wise, and I really
like that idea that they showed in the trailer of the tanks, right? Where you put the two Switches together.
Yeah, it's just about that. How do the parties function, and just enjoy co-op multiplayer games in person. Like, we need to just have that online functionality for these to be like kind of go to the next generation, I guess. And like, yes,
it's the thing that has stopped me from buying the Castlevania and mainly the Contra collection, because like if that Contra collection had online, I think we both would have bought it already and would have started playing Contra together, right?
Exactly, because it's great fun, and we are currently in lockdown. We cannot just hang out at each other's places, and like it is important to have that online functionality. And that's something that is just Mario Party is more or less given up on. But as much as I think some of the mini games are doing well, baseball was always a game I wanted to play. Never played on GameCube. I don't even think it came out in the UK, so it's a hard one.
No, I don't think Sluggers was released here, unfortunately.
Strikers Charged, I never played on GameCube, but I enjoyed a lot on the Wii.
Strikers was GameCube, Strikers Charged was Wii,
exactly.
Right?
Next level games with their polish, which I think a Mario Strikers game on Switch will probably happen at some point, and I think that game will be fine. I don't know how much you can improve that formula, because Strikers Charged was a very good game, although it had some weird Wiimote waving stuff that I don't think has aged the best.
I do wonder, like, is there any advocate within Nintendo to make a Strikers game? Because Next Level seemed to have taken up a next level in terms of the development on Nintendo's side. Like, they are behind one of the best Switch games with Luigi's Mansion 3. Like, they did Punch-Out. They have revived a bunch of Nintendo franchises, and I think they're kind of like this higher tier almost. They're almost like too good for Mario sports games at this point in time, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, and Strikers kind of feels they've kind of reinvented the sport for that game. It's like it doesn't play like a football or a soccer game. It plays like almost an ice hockey or basketball game. It's very fast paced and silly power ups and things.
Kind of like Red Card, where you can like punch people on the pitch.
Yeah, I mean, I'd almost be up for Mario Strikers attempting to do like larger pitch 11-a-side, more traditional football style, but with obviously Mario characters and some added stuff in there. I wouldn't be adverse to them trying something like that. But as you say, I don't think it's a hugely important series in the grand scheme of things. The Next Level, as you say, are probably working on far more important things. I think Mario Tennis, I don't think I've played a good Mario Tennis game since the N64 version and the Game Boy Color version. Obviously, the Game Boy Color version has a huge RPG mode. I never picked up the Game Boy Advance game for Mario Tennis, which I think also had an RPG mode, which I would love to play one day. I think that I can still get that on Wii U, actually. And I had zero interest in the Wii U one, never picked that up, but also that game.
That was maybe one of the worst releases Nintendo has ever done in terms of like lack of things or content at all. I remember watching the Giant Bomb Quick Look, and it's like 15 minutes long, and it's like, yep, this is this is it. There's nothing else here. Yep.
And then that Switch one came out, and it was like hinting at like a campaign with a more RPG style mode, and it just kind of didn't deliver on that.
It was more just like annoying challenges that people ended up finding frustrating and things like that. As much as I think Mario Tennis Aces is much more of an upswing for this, like in terms of talking about our series declining, I would say Tennis is on an upswing because how bad the previous ones were, versus like I guess Striker's on a downswing because it just doesn't exist anymore, right? And golf as well is more on an upswing. People love the 3DS golf game. People thought that was a great game. So
yeah, I mean, on Tennis, I really didn't enjoy the GameCube game, and from there on, I was like, these physics are just nothing like the N64 game. The physics on the N64 game are gold. They are so good. It just, the weight of like the shots and the physics just work so well.
Well, you also weren't a fan of like the giant super moves and things like that, right?
Yeah,
you're much more of a like back to basics tennis approach.
I'm a traditionalist. Yeah, just give me a tennis game with Mario characters. You know, like that's kind of what I liked with tennis. Golf wise, I think the series is going strong. I didn't play the 3DS one, but as you said, MZ, I think a lot of people really like that game. I thought Toadstool Tour on GameCube was fantastic. I think the N64 version was very good. I think the Game Boy Color version, I really enjoyed, and that has an RPG mode. Obviously, we've had like Golf Story since then, which is like a more updated RPG game, which I think is awesome. But I am very confident there will be a very good Mario Golf game on Switch to come that will be based loosely around that 3DS game, because I think out of the Mario sports games, that's kind of what I'm most in on right now.
Do we know who made Mario Tennis Aces? Was it Camelot? I guess.
I don't know. I would guess it was Camelot, but I don't know.
Yeah. They'll be working on something, right? And I would not be surprised if what they're working on is a Mario Golf for Switch, right?
Right.
Like, that seems to make sense.
I would be very up for some Mario Golf on Switch. So yeah, I have most faith in that out of the sort of sports titles, I guess. And yeah, what do I want to see from that? I don't know, just online leaderboards, nice courses, and I think a good looking game is quite important for a title like Mario Golf, especially on Switch. It's got to be crisp, it's got to look good. And yeah,
in those games, do they ever have courses that are like references or things like that? Like a giant course that's Donkey Kong's face or something like that, you know?
Yeah, there was like a special course on Toadstool Tour, which is only par threes for the whole course, and it was just set in like DK's jungle, and it was like,
oh nice,
these are all par threes. And you will have like a Bowser's Castle course, a tropical course, or like traditional foresty course. Yeah, there was a proper like Peach's Castle course on Toadstool Tour which had like warp pipes in it that you'd have to get your ball in and stuff. And
nice. Again,
that the more that they mess up the golf formula, it does make me more kind of like, just give us Mario with golf. Like that's what I want, really.
You're so boring, vanilla Bally. You never want anything.
I am to a degree, but yeah, and golf is something where they've been very careful in my mind in terms of power moves. Yes, you can use a power move, but it is just a more powerful shot. It's not like some crazy, and then the ball flew on a banana across the sky and then landed in the hole. It's not overly crazy. I think they've gone a bit too crazy with tennis, arguably.
Yeah, no, I get that.
Yeah, so yeah, but I have faith, as we've said. I think golf and kart, they're the big sellers probably as well, and I think they're both going to come to Switch again.
Overall, from this perspective of the Mario spin-offs, are we on an upswing? Are we on a downswing? How do you feel?
Generally speaking, an upswing, but on sports specifically, those N64 games are just, especially tennis, I want to see more RPG mechanics brought back in, and I think Nintendo might be just too scared that if you bring RPG mechanics into something like that, it won't sell as well, or it appeals to a very different market from what they want to go for or something. I think there's a real stubbornness to just not going back to that, which feels very strange.
It's interesting. I don't think Golf Story would have done well if it wasn't an RPG, right? Like, if it was just a golf game, I don't think people would have cared.
And Golf Story did well because we hadn't had that golf RPG in so long, and that is because Nintendo have just turned their back on it. And like we've seen loads of series that Nintendo have turned their back on that have done well with like indie spin-offs like Wargroove and Fast Racing Neo and these sorts of things. So like unfortunately, golf and tennis RPGs are one of those things that Nintendo have just decided like it's not up to them anymore, and those gaps are being filled by indie games, and that is it a good thing they're being filled by indie games? Yes. Would I still like to see Nintendo's take on that? Of course, but it's better we have the Golf Stories and Fast Racing Neos of this world than not having them. Definitely.
Yeah, no, I'll take any of those for sure. But I would say we're past the decline. I feel like the decline happened when Mario Tennis on Wii U came out. That was like maybe the lowest point for any Mario spin-off in history.
Low. Yeah.
And we're past that, so we're building back up. We're not quite at the levels of like Toadstool Tour and Mario Tennis 64 and all that stuff yet. But I feel like we're moving towards that, hopefully, to get back into business. But
totally. There's going to be a very good golf game on Switch. I believe it's happening.
The hope is here, for sure.
But thank you very much for your email, Makai. And as I said at the top of the segment, it's an email drought happening right now. We would love you to send in some more emails. So please send them to ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. That is ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. You can also send us a tweet on Twitter. That's @TNL Podcast. We'd hugely appreciate that. Or jump in our Discord server, link in the description, link on Twitter, and we have an emails thread where you can also post comments and questions. We would hugely appreciate it. But that's all we've got time for the second segment. Join us in the next segment where we're going to speculate a bit, talk about Breath of the Wild 2. So see you in a minute.
All right, everyone, welcome back to the final part of the show, where we're going to be talking about something very important, because there's really nothing else to talk about. So why not go wild speculation and dream crazy? Let's talk about The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild 2, final title not confirmed as of yet. Maybe we can start there, Bally. What the hell is this game going to be called, right? Like, it's interesting because Breath of the Wild 2 obviously got announced last year at E3. It was like the one more thing at Nintendo's press conference, and we've seen nothing of it since. We've heard nothing of it since. There's rumors like bounding about that it may have been released at the end of this year. I think all the stuff happening in the world has probably meant that's not going to be the case, and obviously I'm going to take some real heavy losses on my fantasy league unless I just drop it, but it's definitely not a great situation going forward for when that game might come out, but it's probably sooner than we think, and I think that's probably because they're building off a lot of the bones of the first game, right? Like that's kind of what we're imagining here.
I think the name has to be quite far away from Breath of the Wild, and that might sound obvious, but I think the phrase Breath of the Wild is so intrinsic to that feeling of massive open spaces, exploration, that I just... And I'll get to this when I've got some theories about what they could do gameplay-wise, but I think certainly for most part of the game, they're going to move away from the main gaming loop of that formula. And as a result, I think the name has to match that and be something very... I think it'll be very focused on the story. Breath of the Wild is very... Compared to something like Twilight Princess, which I think is quite fairly on the nose. This is the story, this is what we're going to call, or Majora's Mask, that's quite intrinsic as well. Ocarina of Time, Breath of the Wild, like the story's not about the wild.
A lot of the previous names of Zelda games are based around objects, right? Like Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, Skyward Sword, like they're all things within the game, and obviously that kind of has a bit of a lineage with like every Zelda game having some kind of musical instrument in it and things like that, and Breath of the Wild just broke from convention completely in that sense. So yeah, do you feel like the name has to evoke what this game is going for, in a similar sense to what the first game did.
I don't think so, because I think for a lot of casual viewers or followers, they probably just think of Breath of the Wild as Zelda Switch, you know? I don't think the words Breath of the Wild are intrinsic to marketing, to sales, to what that game's going for. I agree that like amongst a Zelda audience and critically it is important. We care a lot about like the follow-up title, but I think if you want Zelda 2 essentially on Switch to sell well, I don't think you need to evoke anything related to Breath of the Wild in terms of like that branding.
Yeah, Nintendo have barely done, like, they don't really, with mainline Mario and Zelda games, put a 2 on the end. The only example we have is, like, Galaxy 2, right? That doesn't... That's generally not the way they roll with it. Zelda especially, because Zelda is always about a different subtitle. There's never been numbers... Well, aside from Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link, there's never been numbers associated with a mainline Zelda game.
Right.
So it would be weird at this point to go back to it and be like, it's Breath of the Wild 2, and they just put a 2 on the end of it. Marketing-wise, that's an easy job done, right? Like, it's very clear. It's like, here is the sequel to that game that everyone loved. Here is another one of those. But I feel like Nintendo want to go beyond that, right? Like, I don't think they are satisfied to just put a 2 on the end and say, it's another one, because I feel like the tone we've got from that trailer, the sense I get from what developers want to do after they've done something like that is not to just do the same thing again, but with slight differences, right?
Yeah.
And I do think like they are obviously reusing stuff asset-wise and like visual-wise. It's probably going to look the same, right? From the art design standpoint, it's going to have that same look to it. But it's going to do something different, right?
That's the thing. I think when you take Breath of the Wild and you think, what is the gaming loop of Breath of the Wild? And you realize that it's very hard to change one aspect of that loop and not affect another part of the game. So what I mean is like, you're in an open space, you see a shrine up on a hill, you want to visit that shrine. The quest to getting to the shrine is part of the game. That's like an exciting thing in and of itself. There might be enemies on the way. There might be something you collect. There might be a field of horses. There might be this. There's things you see on the way. Then you get to that shrine. You do the puzzle. You do the challenge. You get a thing. And then you rinse and repeat. That's essentially like more or less the loop in that game. And I think that the second you take away, say, the shrines, I think you've lost a lot of like the impetus for the reasons why you explore aspects of that world. So I think that in that sense, they're going to do something very radically different. And I actually think that because... Here's my theory. My theory is the first half of the game could be incredibly linear and very new and do something very different, in a bit like Majora's Mask versus Ocarina of Time. But then I think say the first half of the game is underground or something, like the trailer was, and then the second half of the game, something plot-wise happens, a bit like Final Fantasy VI perhaps, and the world opens up, and all of a sudden the loops and things you enjoyed the most about Breath of the Wild fall back into line, and all of a sudden there are shrines and things to visit and it's a new world. So like you get the benefit of like a strong story, which I think is one thing Breath of the Wild was lacking. And then you still get the benefit of a wider world to explore, which was obviously the best part of Breath of the Wild.
Interesting. Yeah, I like that idea of the Final Fantasy VI model, because you're right, it's more of a linear game and then it becomes an open world game. Like there is this very much this turning point that happens and it flips itself completely. I like that idea. I think that if they want to tell a better story, if they want to have it be more cohesive, they do have to tighten things a bit more, right? Make it a bit more linear. And I wonder if Nintendo wants to take that risk, because I think they know, and everyone knows, the reason Breath of the Wild was so crazy successful was because it was the most open thing in video game history. Like, that is the identity of why that game did well. And so I think Nintendo might be worried if they strip that away. What are they like?
Yeah, even for half a game, it's quite a radical thing to do. I get that.
Yes, yeah, definitely. So I don't think they would do that. I would like them to be able to tell a much more coherent and interesting story, but it's really tricky to kind of understand how you would do that without making it more close to a generic open world game, right?
Yeah.
You have a game like Horizon, which I know you really like, and as much as I have my criticisms of that game, they pace out the story really well. They deliberately have you go to these specific points at the specific moment in order to see this cutscene, which will reveal more, which will then open up more of the map, etc., etc. That, from the like a game design standpoint, goes against some of the tenets of Breath of the Wild, but it does still manage to have a pretty open space for you to explore, alongside still having that linear narrative, right? And Breath of the Wild has some of this. It's just you can do it in whatever order you want, so it throws it off a little bit, right? It would require taking away the player choice of what order you want to do all the dungeons in, and it would instead be you have to do dungeons in 1, 2, 3, 4 order, right?
I think as cool as the world in Horizon is, there's very little impetus to see the top of every peak, whereas that in Breath of the Wild, there's more or less a shrine at least nearby to every peak, or something to see at every peak. So I feel like I very much covered the entire map of Breath of the Wild a lot more evenly, radically different to something like Horizon, where there's a lot of corridors and areas where a lot of story takes place, and by and large there's corners of that world you'll barely even see and don't even have to see if you just want to mainline that game. Whereas if you want to see all the shrines in Breath of the Wild, which is a fairly fundamental part of the game, more or less, so obviously you don't have to do them all, but you feel like by the end of the game, if you have covered all 120, you have more or less not evenly spread throughout the map, but evenly spread compared to a traditional, more open world game like a Horizon.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing. It's like I never felt, and in general, this is the case with most Western style open world games, I never really have an impetus or a desire to go and discover things, right? It's one of the reasons Xenoblade speaks to me, because it rewards you for discovering things, right? Like I talked about that moment at the end of Xenoblade 1 where I was like level 73 or something, and I found this hidden cave, and I jumped to like level 75 by finding a discovered area, and that's like a tangible reward for going out and exploring places, and these other games don't really give me that. Like maybe I'll find a cool weapon or something, or maybe I'll get an upgrade point or whatever, but it's not the type of thing that gives me the desire to go out there and find everything.
Will Breath of the Wild 2 have shrines?
Oh boy. Okay, so this is an interesting question, right, about the dungeon design. Let's maybe just talk about dungeons, because I think this is a fundamental, like, controversial point with the original game, because there are a lot of people out there who were not a fan of the dungeons, who thought they are too simple, they're too small, they all look the same, because they have that same aesthetic of the shrines, which is, this kind of neo-futuristic, like, almost temple structure that has like humming blue lights
like
and everything.
Sci-fi old temple, I don't know.
Yeah, basically it's almost like future temples underground and stuff like that. And it was a disappointment to a lot of people, I think, to find that okay, the dungeons are kind of just bigger shrines, and the way that they work is in keeping with Breath of the Wild in the sense that you can do all these different what do you call them, like terminals. You go to the terminal points to scan your card. Essentially, it's like going to credit card machines and like scanning them, and you can do those in any order within the dungeon. But I think it just made for an experience that wasn't super interesting on like a micro scale of what that game was trying to do, and that is, I think, part of the reason. The other part is just the aesthetics of them and them not having a coherent theme to them or doing something different with them.
So it's like they were just short in temper. It's like they were designed on purpose so that they didn't take long, and that you would spend more time back in the overworld than in these dungeons. Almost like it felt like there was a reason to why they were like this. Yeah,
definitely. I like the concept behind them, right? They are moving objects. The one that crawls around the mountain, the one that flies in the sky, they exist within the space of the world, which I think is just a fundamentally amazing idea. I think it's just that they kind of fall down in execution somewhat, right? Just when you get to the meat and bones. What's your dream for dungeons, right? Like, forsaking what you think they're going to do, what is your dream? Is your dream to have shrines again, or is it to like kind of get rid of them and focus a bit more on having 8 dungeons, and each of those dungeons are more linear and kind of more in the traditional Zelda style?
I think it's about marrying some of the more traditional Zelda dungeons like Ocarina of Time, like Twilight Princess, but then having that feeling of awe and wonder where you get a new item that you've never seen before and use it in a very strange way. And I think a game like Skyward Sword does that incredibly well, where it's got a very unique set of weapons, and an item like the spinner in Twilight Princess, where some of the other items in Twilight Princess were perhaps less innovative. You've still got your boomerang, you've still got other weapons that are more in line with traditional Zelda, but then you've got the spinner that is just completely different and almost turns like dungeons into like a pinball machine. So I think having traditional dungeons, and traditional, I mean longer, a little tougher perhaps. Obviously you've got a final boss, but then I think something with the innovation of some of the weapons you get in a Skyward Sword. So that sort of combination, I think would be pretty great.
I think talking of the kind of weapons, the arsenal that you have, obviously the first game, you have everything out the gate. Within the first 3 hours, let's say, of the Great Plateau, you have all the tools you'll use for the rest of the game. And that's cool because you can then go anywhere. But it also felt a little limiting, or it feels like it takes some of the excitement out of the Zelda experience, in that you know you're not going to get anything that's going to fundamentally change your toolkit, right? You'll get upgrades like Rivali's Gale, or you'll get Mifa's whatever that brings you back to life. Those bonuses that will help you, but the fundamental tool set always remains the same. And that was great because all of those kind of physics-based items worked in synchronicity with one another, and there was always weird, wonderful ways you could combine them and do strange things. But it did leave something to be desired in terms of, oh, I wish I could go into a dungeon and get another thing. That doesn't necessarily change the fundamentals of the play, but like adds a wrinkle to it that would make things a bit more interesting and give you other opportunities to do the things you'd already been doing.
Because the only other game I can think of, Zelda game, where you're given access to all the weapons and you still need specific weapons per dungeon, and then you can also don't have to do those dungeons in a linear order, is Link Between Worlds. And I think I don't see why you couldn't just mirror that idea on a vast 3D scale. If the issue is, as you say, like with Breath of the Wild, it was like you have these specific items, and then each dungeon doesn't use items specifically. You just kind of use the same items across the entire world. You could say something like there are multiple shops or something where you are able to pick up all the weapons, and then they're almost like as if the items are in the overworld and they almost act as keys to each dungeon. So you need the weapon to get into the dungeon, and that will mean that you will have the necessary weapon through the dungeon or something like it. But at the same time, it's non-linear. You can still do any dungeon in any order you like. It's just about discovering these threads throughout the world to say, all right, that's where I get this weapon. Okay, I've got this weapon. Right, that must match up to this dungeon entrance that I've seen on my map that I marked. Let's go use it there. So I think that would be an interesting way around the Breath of the Wild issue that allows you to introduce a bunch of interesting items. And then those items could still be used in the overworld, but it's not gated perhaps in such a strict Metroidvania sense. It's just you can perhaps access or reach something else later in the game.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to... One of the things I think about is actually Xenoblade Chronicles X, right? Because Xenoblade Chronicles X does a really interesting thing where the terrain that is built is very much... They think about it vertically. They think about how the player will get to an area and they will just be on foot for the most part, and there will be large areas above them that they can't get to yet that are there but are inaccessible. And so it still allows them to go throughout the entire space, but then once you get the Skell, you're like, oh, now I can get up to this place by, jumping a little higher with my Skell, and I can get to this further point. And then like another 20 hours later, your Skell gets the Fly Anywhere upgrade, and then that verticality really opens up, and you can go all the way to the top of this just vast landscape and look over it from this ridiculous height. And I think that's a really cool model where the player can kind of go anywhere but can't. Like, they can go anywhere horizontally, and so that entire space, that landmass is available, but there are still things that are slightly out of reach that require a bit more of an upgrade. And I think that is maybe one way to do it. Obviously, like, it takes away the true freedom of the original game, but if you want to start implementing ways in which, you know, you can drip feed more interesting items that then expand things over time, I'd say that's probably one of the best ways to do it. Like, it's not perfect, but it's a way to approach that situation. Which I enjoyed and thought worked quite well. And especially, you know, a lot of people from Monolith are working on the Zelda team at this point in time, you know, mainly on the tech side, right, and helping them with the open world and streaming things in. And
we're going to get some scales in Zelda and Breath of the Wild too.
Well, here's the thing, right, like, we can maybe talk about some of those ideas that they had shown at, like, GDC talks of, like, they had the idea for the motorcycle and then they ended up putting it in the game of the DLC. They had this idea of, like, aliens coming down and things like that. And that's another question, right? What is happening with that castle? Is the castle going up or is the castle going down? Because in the case of the castle going up, then we're just fucking leaving behind Hyrule and we're going somewhere completely new, and the space will be different, and therefore they can maybe do even more interesting things. I think the worry may be that if the space stays the same, what do you do to it? Do you expand it like we hoped the DLC would do, and like those mountains that you can kind of see in the background become a part of the landmass and you can then travel and discover even further from where you've been? What are your hopes here, Bally? My personal dream would be a brand new area, right? Would just be, you don't, this game doesn't take place in Hyrule, it takes place somewhere completely different, and you have a brand new space to explore. That's my personal ideal, but I understand that that's probably a little unfeasible considering development timeline and just making another game.
I think that it is feasible to do a new area. I just think if you're hoping for the scale of the first game, it's probably less likely. And I do think it would be far too controversial to retread the same world. Even if they do something to that world, I think that would be a shortcut I just couldn't see Nintendo going for, in a way. You know what I mean? Like, I think
it depends on like how much time has passed. It doesn't seem like Link and Zelda kind of look the same, but again, they're video game characters. How do you age them in a way that, like, Nintendo doesn't tend to do that type of thing, right? It's not like Sony where Nathan Drake looks like he's pushing 40 on Uncharted 4 versus...
Yeah, or you're playing as an old Kratos in
Yeah, exactly.
the reboot. Yeah,
totally. Like, Nintendo just doesn't really do that. Well, it's also part of the reason because their characters are always in a different world, in a different setting, and they aren't really connected.
Castle. Yes.
In another castle, yes, very, very good. Yeah, so like how much time has passed, which is to say, would Hyrule have had the time to build up infrastructure? Is Hyrule Castle restored? Is there a bustling castle town? Is there, you know, a new city that has arisen? Like, are some of these seaside towns kind of built out and gentrified and stuff like this? Has there been enough time difference between the games for that sort of change to occur? And I personally don't think so. It's probably like, I would say like 3 years or something as a maximum gap between them.
I think there's a good chance of it being a new world, and I do think that very much like Majora's Mask Castle Town, there could be like a central intense city town, whatever you want to call it, that a lot of the game focuses around, and then you have like branching out areas or something that are intrinsically very different. And I don't know, would they do like a reveal midway through the game at some point, story related, where they're like, you need to go back to Hyrule and do X, and you're all this...
Right.
And then there's like a real big plot emphasis on returning to that world. And yes, they'll change aspects of the world, but you'll be so excited of the plot reasons to be going back that as a player, you won't even mind that they've barely changed anything.
Yes.
I feel like there has to be really, really good reasons to reuse that stuff. And I'm not saying that's beyond Nintendo, but I do think it's a gamble potentially beyond them. But I could see a situation where you are in some other world, and maybe like that scene we see with the castle going up or down is halfway through the game, or I don't know. It doesn't necessarily mean it's the start of the game. So I think there's really cool things they could do that I think, I'm always been convincing myself that they do need to evoke some Breath of the Wild stuff. And one of those things, if they do fundamentally change the systems, could be keeping aspects of that world the same that you revisit, even if you start on some distant island.
It is one of my favorite things in video games where they pull and we're going back there, right? Like, Going
It's
to
great,
Johto
yeah.
in Pokemon Gold and Silver, and Kanto in Pokemon Gold and Silver, top tier moment of video games. Going back to Shadow Moses Island in Metal Gear Solid 4, I didn't play it, but watching that is just, it's like fucking fan service. It's like incredible fan service.
Yeah.
And I think that the problem here is that they've already kind of set up that they're still in Hyrule, so it may not hit as hard because we know like there's a potential the game is just set in Hyrule again, right? It's that option could be unavailable to us. But
that could be the start of the game, and
Right,
either
yeah.
the castle goes up or something goes down, and then the plot immediately goes to Link. You need to go to this island to do X, and the first time you're playing as Link, you are on the island. And I mean, if Zelda is playable, imagine if that happened in a story moment at the same time you come back to Hyrule or something like that. That would just be so cool and beyond what they've ever done with Zelda before. I think it would be really cool. Like, or what if the way you traverse, because it's a world you've seen before, what if the way you traverse the world when you return is different? So I'm not talking about like the motorbike or a horse. What about like flight or in some way?
airships, right? Go Final
Airships.
Fantasy.
Go airships. Or what they called in Skyward Sword, the
Loft Wings.
loft wings, or something like that.
Yeah, I like the idea of Loft Wings coming back. But let's address the Zelda question, right? This is probably the biggest question. Is Zelda playable in this game?
My ideal would be that she is, and as I said, she
Yeah,
becomes
I think
a
both
plot,
of our
point.
hopes and dream is like, yes, Zelda is playable.
Yeah, but I'm saying my ideal is that she's a plot point and it happens maybe 20 hours into the game. Like, it's not at the start, and then fans are playing through and they're like, is she here or not? And I'm sure the internet will spoil it, but potentially they won't, who knows. And then you're 20 hours in and it is that sort of...
Link dies 20 hours in and Zelda is playable, basically.
Maybe not dies, but is locked away, is imprisoned.
Sure.
Or what if you're playing a plot as Link on this new island and something horrendous happens to him, and then the entire game, Earthbound style, just cuts to Zelda in Hyrule, and all of a sudden you're playing as Zelda, and then the end of the game is Zelda saving Link in the new land.
Right, yeah.
Like...
well, here's the thing. We already have a setup, right? We have a setup because we've seen the trailer. And the trailer suggests shit happens in that tomb with dead Ganondorf coming back or whatever's going to happen with that, right? Does Link get locked away right at the start of the game? Is that what's happening there, right? Like, people are speculating about the blue light going into him and things like that. Does he get sealed away, Ganon gets released, and Zelda's the one who has to do the shit, right? She is then the playable character from the beginning. Because the other interesting thing is, let's think about this from a game design and narrative standpoint. The Link at the end of Breath of the Wild is a fucking badass, right? He has all his weaponry, he can, so many hearts and all this shit. Usually in Metroid games, it's a stupid thing where Samus gets bonked on the head and whoops, all her power-ups fall out of her, right? And Nintendo are not above doing that. But from this perspective, right, think of Zelda as a character who needs to be built up, who needs to get her own tools and her own power set, and she's not set up as a... She's set up as a very kind of cool character, but I don't think they set her up as the adventurous princess. Like, to some degree she is explorative and stuff like that, but Link was always her bodyguard, and they set her up as like, oh no, she fell on the ground, and like the Sheikah people are attacking her and Link needs to save her. Like, they do a bit of damsel in distress stuff with her, which I'm not a huge fan of, but like,
I almost do it more so in Breath of the Wild in a way where in other Zeldas on final bosses and things, she does contribute a lot more with like her magic skills and stuff. And
definitely, like Twilight Princess, she's shooting a bow with you. In Wind Waker, she's shooting a bow. Like, she's usually has a bow of light. That's kind of Zelda's item. Is that the kind of basis that we start with her, of like, she is more of a focus on bows directly than using swords, and that's her core weapon set. That's my perspective of like, if they're going to reset things and they want to start out with a new character who doesn't have any skills and has to build themselves up, just playing as Zelda from the start makes so much sense. And when you take it from the context of what we've seen so far, that's kind of where my head is at. It's also where my heart is at, but I feel like where my head is at can also be undermined by Nintendo at any given moment, because they just do whatever the hell they like, right? So
is it a bigger deal to start as Zelda and then Link becomes freed or something mid-game and you play as Link for the second half, or maybe you have the choice in the second half between the two? Or is it more of a big reveal if it is what I suggested, where you start as Link and then Zelda is playable 15, 20 hours in?
I think it's a bigger deal if Zelda is playable from the start, but the other challenge for the marketing is that they have to tell you that, basically, right?
Yeah.
Because they can't show you gameplay if Link's not playable and Zelda's the playable character for the majority of the game, you know that straight away as soon as they show gameplay. So it's not a reveal, right?
God of War, there's a big thing in there that I won't spoil that wasn't revealed in any of the marketing. That's a weapon more so than a character. I get that, but is it beyond Nintendo to suggest that Zelda would be playable and then they don't use that in the marketing?
Well, it depends, right? In this day and age, I think it's impossible to keep secrets like that. Like, there's, to some degree, if it's later in the game, it's much easier because what you're showing the press early on and what you're showing fans early on is here's the start of the game, here's where it's going to be starting from. So if you wanted to have a reveal of Zelda is playable and make that a surprise for people, you then have to.
It becomes like an E3 reveal, perhaps, rather than just an in-game reveal.
Well, yeah. If you want to do it in the way of like Ellie is playable in Last of Us, because that was a thing they literally lied about before the game came out. Like, journalists asked them, "Will you play as Ellie?" And Neil Druckmann was like, "No, you never play as her in this game," and he lied basically because he wanted to preserve the secrecy of it. Versus, the thing that happens midway through God of War, which is something that is a cool reveal, and they didn't talk about because they want it to just surprise players. If you're gonna keep Zelda until later in the game, you lie about it and you say she's not playable because then it's a surprise when you get to it. Versus if she is playable from the beginning, you're right, it has to be like a Mario Cap and Odyssey style thing where there's a crazy trailer and that's the surprise, is the marketing surprise, right?
I was going to say, what's the biggest mid-game reveal Nintendo have done previously, would you say?
Man, I don't know that Nintendo do reveals in the same way. I
mean, Dragon and Mario Odyssey is pretty big.
Sure, yeah, that's a pretty good one. But like that's just a moment. Like I don't think that fundamentally changes anything about the game, right?
Right. I struggle to see how, unless Zelda is brought down to being a playable moment, as in like you play for her as a few hours or at say the very end of the game.
Right.
You're right. I don't see how they could keep it sort of under lock and key.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely feasible because people didn't know that Ellie was playable and people didn't know about the God of War thing. So, like, absolutely, if it's really like multiple deep hours into the game, then they can get away with it. It's
if you play for Zelda as a proportion of the game for as long as you play as Ellie in Last of Us 1, is that enough?
That also suggests the nature of the game, though, right? Because if you play as Zelda for a limited amount of time, that implies there are story beats you have to hit in order for her to become unplayable again, right? It's not the open space that it was in the first game where, like, story beats aren't going to change the main character or the playability of it because you can do whatever you want whenever you want, right? So we're in this theoretical perspective, which I think... now that I'm thinking about it more, the way Nintendo design their games, the way they kind of think about things, especially following up Breath of the Wild, it makes more sense for me for Zelda to be playable straight out the gate. Because if you do a late game thing, it implies that the game is more linear because you have to get to the point where you play as Zelda and then you have to get out of playing Zelda, right? Versus if you just start as her entire quest is she's got to save Link, right? It's just the inverse, which, it's just inverting a trope. It's not super interesting, but it's the kind of milquetoast like approach Nintendo would take to like, let's change the Zelda formula, right? Like it's not that bold, even though in many ways for them it is.
Yeah, no, I think that's possible. And I think it is games like Uncharted and God of War that have just make you yearn for just a really story-driven kind of Zelda, and I think that's almost too much to ask for.
You see, you say that, and yeah, I don't feel that way, right? Like I do wish that the voice acting was better. I do wish that the writing was a bit tighter, and I wish that there was a bit more coherency to the storytelling. But ultimately, for me, and this has just been the case generally, I will always, if a game has a terrible story but it plays amazingly, I will still
Yeah.
enjoy that game.
I think
if the game has an amazing story but plays garbage, I will not enjoy that game as much.
Yeah.
And that's the fundamental thing with video games for me is I can absolutely dismiss a bad story because Breath of the Wild is my favorite game of all time, and I think it has a bad story, right?
I when I say like a top tier story, I don't mean a top tier story. I don't think they're going to get anywhere near sort of Last of Us kind of levels, and I just think it'd be nice if it had a good story, not like
Right. Yes.
so like not
I
Uncharted
think Zelda
levels.
games have had good stories before. I think Skyward Sword is a good story. Like, there's some fun characters in there. It's probably my favorite Zelda story of all of them.
Yeah, no, it's a very good story. I agree. Just that level with some pretty good voice acting and some great cutscenes, and to make a portion of the game, even if it's not the whole game, a bit more story driven, I would just really appreciate that.
Yeah, for sure. So we'll see. Any other aspects that you have dreams about, Bally, that you want to be in this game?
I think a new world is probably the most like my most important thing would be a new world, but at some point to visit Hyrule. And obviously with the trailer, it suggests at least a portion of the game is going to be in Hyrule. So I'm pretty happy about that if that's what could happen. But I am really confused as to what they're going to do for the game loop.
Yes. For me, it's definitely, that's the best thing about the game is just the explorable space. I would like to see a bit more, and they went very far with this, but like, let's go even further with the interactions that systems have with one another, like the chemical systems and the physics systems. I want to see even more possibilities of those, because one of my favorite things about the original game was the discovery of, like, if you have a fire rod on your back, it keeps you warm, and then if you just crouch near a giant block of ice, it will slowly melt. Like, those type of gameplay discoveries are absolutely in my top tier of things I love about that game, and so just adding even more things like that would be incredible. And, you know, maybe even adding aspects from previous Zelda games that could, you know, remember in Twilight Princess where you're going around collecting bugs for Agatha? Like, it's a kind of a collection question, it's not that interesting, but what if they kind of fold in a bit of Animal Crossing into this game, and you are hunting bugs, and there's kind of ways to approach them. Like, one of my favorite quests in the original was trying to get onto the back of a deer, and how you would approach it, and riding it up to that platform to get the shrine quest completed.
Yeah,
like things like that. You know,
I really like the sort of collectible aspect of Breath of the Wild, where you're like, oh, I need the diamond to make this, to do craft. I'd like to increase the crafting, and I do think like animal skins, certain bugs, potentially certain fish could be incorporated into that crafting network, and just kind of expand
layering
on that.
just a bit more of a survival element on top of it, even more
Right.
so, because like the stories we talk about like how you were going up that ice mountain and like you were like scrambling for supplies and shit like that, like I don't want it to get overbearing, because I think survival games can get that way of like, oh, I have a fucking hunger meter, please do not add a hunger meter to Zelda. That would be a bad call. But like there are definitely elements of like camouflage and stuff like that I do enjoy, that I think would be added benefits to systems they already have in
More
place.
surprising large creatures, large enemies, like dragons appearing. Like,
I think general enemy variety was another thing that I would
Right.
like to be better, because most of the time it was like Bokoblin and Lizalfos, and then like different colored variants of them that were stronger. That would definitely be a big improvement for me, is like, let's have bigger like encounterable enemies, but also just the general low-level guys. Let's have a few more different
Right.
types out there, so that you have more to fight against.
I mean, the Lionel fights are great, but imagine if each Lionel was a different creature, how incredible that would be. Like, that would just be insane. And it's like, oh, you don't want to fight that serpent up in the frost area. It's horrendous. So like that sort of thing. And each one you fight in a slightly different way.
And that kind of ties into dungeons with just more unique boss fights, because like the Ganon guys were like fine, and they did have some interesting elements to them, but again, similar to the dungeons, they all kind of looked the same. They had a similar design to them, and that all tied into the narrative as well. But as you said, like, what if one was this giant snake and one was this kind of like scorpion and things like that we've had before in the past, but they can add wrinkles to them and stuff like that. Would be very cool.
When are we gonna play this game?
Next year. There's no way it's coming out this
November
year.
21.
Yeah, I feel like they could put it out in spring, but I think things have probably been shaken up to the point where it will be a holiday title for next year. And I think we will probably see... When will we see more about this game? Because I think that E3 this year was their planned idea, and obviously they'll do a presentation of some sort around that time, even though E3 is cancelled.
Yeah.
I do hope we get a bit of reveal about what that game is. Like,
I hope so as well, but if it's November 21, it wouldn't surprise me if we don't see anything of it at E3 this year, and you'll probably see gameplay E3 21.
Yeah.
Which is a shame, but I want to see more of this game. Unless they want to do another trailer that is potentially story related, that is completely juxtaposed and different to the first one, and everyone goes whoa, and everyone just has another year to stew over plot things and this kind of thing. But I don't know.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. Well, I think that's going to wrap us up for Breath of the Wild 2 Hopes and Dreams. It'll be a good game. I'll love it. Look, no matter what it is, it's a Zelda game. I'm going to be excited for it, and I'm going to play it. So that's good times ahead. Cool. Bally, we want to remind some folks that they can go over to our survey that we have going on right now. A lot of people have done it. Thank you for everyone who has done it so far. Got some very helpful things being said there. But if you have not done the survey yet, it will be linked in the description for the podcast. It will take you 5-6 minutes, and is just really, really helpful for us to kind of figure out the direction of the show in the future and things we might want to change up and things like that. So if you could just head over to the description, either on YouTube or on the podcast service you're using or wherever, it will be linked there directly, and you can do it on your phone, you can do it on a browser, wherever. It's very easy, and
it takes about 5 to 6 minutes.
Yeah. So if you just give us a bit of your time, that would be very, very appreciated, and probably roll that for another couple of weeks or so, and then we'll close it off. But that would be very, very good. Obviously, we would like to thank our patrons. We have had some new patrons recently, which is fantastic. Quite a few new people who have joined, which is awesome to see. And we have some new people to thank as well, Bally, as part of our patron tier.
Yes, we have 2 new $10 tier patrons. A huge thank you to both Jackpot and Thomas for your $10 tier support, and thank you to our other $10 tier patrons. They are, of course, Atari Alex and my fiance Caroline. Thank you very much to all 4 of you, and thank you very much to all of our patrons. It is hugely appreciated, the support you give us, especially during this time. We just put out an episode of TNL Ranks last week. And we were talking about our favorite RPG battle systems. So that was a good topic.
Yeah, it was fun. And I think, it's one of those where we're like, hey, let's do this specifically, so then we can do more talk about different combat systems in the future. It's because there's lots of avenues through video games that we can kind of dig into, which is cool. So check that out if you're interested in RPGs and our thoughts on our favorite battle systems, and some cool picks in there. And yeah, check out the Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/ThisNintendoLife if you are interested in checking out a bunch of episodes. We do bonus episodes every month, so have a look, and if it's to your liking, give us a listen. Cool. We are also found all over the internet in lots of different places. You can find us on iTunes, on Stitcher, on Spotify, on TuneIn, and you can find us on all the podcasting apps out there. Just search for This Nintendo Life, subscribe to us, pop us a review on Apple Podcasts if you can. That would be very nice as well, and tell people about the show if you enjoy the show. That would be very much appreciated. We can be found in our various places on the internet where we talk on the internet. That is Twitter mainly, and we're on Twitter with our podcast account, which is at TNL Podcast. You can follow there for updates, links to the Discord, email address, all those types of things. And you can find me at LordNBZ. I'm talking stuff a lot of the time. I don't know. I posted a bunch of videos of me playing as Tifa in Final Fantasy. I'm always posting Animal Crossing stuff. I don't know what else I've been posting, to be honest. Just
you've been making quizzes.
I've been making quizzes, yeah. That's been a fun thing. Bally, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Ballyman91. That's BALLYMAN91. I don't know what I've been tweeting about. I've been watching things on Disney Plus, like the Imagineering story, which is incredible, and I'd highly recommend. What else did I watch? I can't remember now, but yeah.
The Mandalorian behind the scenes thing's coming out soon, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, they did a trailer for that. So.
And it's coming May 4th, Star Wars Day.
Of course it's May 4th. They would obviously they'd do that.
In the US and in the UK, shockingly. The UK
Wow.
is actually getting a Disney Plus exclusive show at the same time as the US, according to Twitter. I'll believe it when I see it.
Earth-shaking achievements here by Disney. Truly magnificent. Great. Well, that's going to close out the show. Final call for emails, because we do need some more. Bally, where can they send them?
Please send them to thisnintendolife@gmail.com. That is thisnintendolife@gmail.com.
Fantastic. Please send those in. Otherwise, next show, we're going to be sitting here making up questions for ourselves. So please do that. And we'll see you in a couple of weeks' time. Until then, stay safe, stay sane, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye, folks. The musical interludes used on today's show were the Snow track from the Super Mario 3D World tile set in Super Mario Maker 2, copyright Nintendo 2019, and Glimmer from the Spyro Reignited Trilogy, copyright Activision 2018. Mario Maker 2, a game that Nintendo has done fucking dirty, in my mind.
I'm so glad they finally added worlds to, like, God. Restart this shit.
Oh dear, Bally.
That's what I get for my snark.
Yeah, I know. Absolutely. Okay.
I can just make my point again.
Yeah, go for it.
I'm so glad they finally added worlds to this game. They finally added new game modes. You know, they got Mario Maker. Oh, God, I fucked up again. Jeez, what am I Well, am I trying to say what they called? They're called Game Worlds.
They added World Maker, basically.
That's not what you know what I want to say.
Super Worlds.
No, not. I want to say they finally added. My joke was they finally. It's not that funny. I have to explain.
I love it. You can't even think of the way to do the joke. It's good.
Between, say, 3D World, Super Mario World.
Oh, right. Yes.
What do you call those?
Style. Game style.
Yes. Okay, ready?
All right. Yeah. Okay. Here we go. I'm excited for this joke now. Let's do it. Let's do the joke.